Chapter 840. 16th Knights ridiculed in an exaggerated tone. In fact, whether it was 16th Knights or the others, they were already surprised that Wu-Ming was able to find the no-name flag. And Wu-Ming finding Letitia's divine spark and sun sovereignty was also out of everyone's expectations. Not to mention the divine spark, there were only 25 sun sovereignty. Not to mention the number of people in Box Court. Just the number of communities in Box Court was as many as the stars in the sky and the gravel on the ground. It was reasonable to say that Wu-Ming was able to obtain the no-name flag, Letitia's divine spark and Ophiuchus' sun sovereignty from Galgi, but they didn't expect that Wu-Ming would actually ask Galgi to hand over other things. To be honest, everyone began to guess who was the person that Wu-Ming had captured to be able to make Galgi suffer such a big loss. Seeing everyone's doubts, Wu-Ming began to explain. My original request was to return the no-name item, but Galgi wasn't the mastermind behind the scenes, he was just a puppet, so I didn't expect to exchange it for many things. Wu-Ming was hoping to get some other good things from Galgi, but he didn't expect Galgi and the others to carry so many gifts that belonged to no-name. The no-name flag was taken out from her gift card when Wu-Ming woke Ling up, and Letitia's divine spark and Ophiuchus' sun sovereignty were taken out by Galgi. By the way, the gifts of Box Court could only be obtained through transactions, transfers, or gift competitions. They couldn't be stolen. The community flag was this type of gift. The Demon King used his authority to attack the no-name 3 years ago. The Demon King won, and the flag became the Demon King's possession. After that, the flag was transferred to Galgi, and Galgi transferred it to Wu-Ming through a transaction witnessed by Box Court. If Wu-Ming tried to steal it, the no-name flag might be invalidated by Box Court system. However, Box Ting's system dispelled Wu-Ming's thoughts of taking advantage of others. It was rather regretful. Asterisk cough asterisk cough asterisk. Asterisk in short, thanks to the Box Court system, Galgi was able to hand over everything that belonged to no-name. The flag of no-name, Letitia's divinity, the sovereignty of the sun of the Ophiuchus constellation, and the last one, the sovereignty of the Leo sun. After Wu-Ming finished speaking, the gift card that he had yet to put away suddenly burst out with a ray of light, and the aura of the sun that was no weaker than that of Ophiuchus constellation rushed over. This is another sun sovereign. Pester was shocked once again. There were only 25 sun sovereigns, and Wu-Ming had taken out 2 of them in just a short while. In the lower level of the courtyard, there were actually 2 sun sovereigns in the 7-digit outer sect. What kind of explosive news was this? Speaking of which, other than Letitia, is there anyone else in no-name who has a sun sovereign? It wasn't that Wu-Ming was curious, but it was mainly because there were too few sun sovereigns. White Wuxia and her old enemy together held 20 sun sovereigns. Excluding the additional Ophiuchus constellation, there were only 4 sun sovereigns that were wandering outside. Even if no-name was once the largest community in the East District, with only 4 people, it was still extremely difficult to collect sun sovereigns. Therefore, when Wu-Ming knew that the sun sovereign of the Leo constellation was once bestowed by no-name, he was indeed shocked. This once again proved that no-name was indeed the largest community in the East District. That was the sun sovereign that the Sun Lion once held. Black Rabbit began to explain. Because it was a divine beast that pulled the chariot of the sun god, it coincidentally obtained the sun sovereign of the Leo constellation. However, 3 years ago, it and its other companions were captured by the Demon King that attacked no-name. Black Rabbit's expression was a little sad, as if it was recalling what happened 3 years ago. However, Galgi holding the sun sovereign of the Leo constellation proved that Galgi and the others had an undeniable relationship with the Demon King that attacked no-name. Even the sun sovereign has returned to our hands. No-name's former companions will be found in the future. Seeing the depressed Black Rabbit, Wu-Ming opened his mouth to comfort him. Yes, I understand, Mr. Villo. Black Rabbit shook his head and once again revealed a smile. He couldn't always be depressed, he had to be motivated. Speaking of which, who should I give the sun sovereign of the Leo constellation to? Wu-Ming was distressed. At this time, Pes was eager to give it a try. However, Pes didn't even have time to speak. Since Master brought it back, then it's appropriate to give it to Master to use. Letitia suggested. Anyway, I don't need it. 16th Knights shrugged his shoulders. He, 16th Knights, wasn't going to take advantage of it. I don't need it either. I have Dean. Miss Jiufei Niao was the same. She didn't want the favor of charity. If there was a need, she would fight for it herself, just like when she obtained Dean. Haruai Buyao also shook his head. I just want to make friends. As for me, Mr. Villo already lent me Argel. Ren was slightly embarrassed when he said this. When Ren first heard that Wu Ming wanted to give him Argel, he was scared silly. That was a star spirit. Wouldn't it be making a mountain out of a molehill if he gave it to him? However, in the end, under Wu Ming's tough attitude, Ren had no choice but to borrow it from Wu Ming. Wu Ming wasn't going to take it back anyway. Naturally, I don't need it either. Letitia also shook her head. Not to mention that she already had the Sun Sovereign of the Ophiuchus constellation. She had already gained enough from this loot-sharing conference. Naturally, she didn't need it. Black Rabbit doesn't need it either. Black Rabbit shook his head and his rabbit ears swayed along with it. Black Rabbit was mainly the judge of the gift competition. Even in terms of combat power, Black Rabbit wasn't to be underestimated. He was given 4 godhood equipment by Sakura when he was young, and was worshipped by the rabbits as the son of God. Black Rabbit was actually very strong. Lily doesn't need it either. After all, Lily is a support staff. Hee, Lily laughed mischievously. I don't need it either. Wu Ming shrugged his shoulders helplessly. He had the Sun incarnation and didn't need the power of the sun. As for the Sun Sovereign's ability to summon star beasts, it was just a summon. With the dependent incarnation, it was equivalent to a summon. Therefore, Wu Ming didn't need the Sun Sovereign. However, Pest was roaring in his heart. If you don't need it, you can give it to me. Finally, Mr. Pest made a rare speech. Cough cough. According to the Sun Sovereign of the Leo constellation's ability, as well as everyone's ability, we can just make a reasonable plan. No matter what, he had to fight for it. Wu Ming looked at Pest meaningfully. Pest was almost scared to death. In the end, Wu Ming nodded. What Pest said makes sense. Immediately after, Wu Ming looked at Black Rabbit. Black Rabbit, does the Sun Sovereign of the Leo constellation have any other abilities? If the Sun Sovereign was only able to summon star beasts, it would be too cheap. The Black Rabbit stretched out a finger and gently tapped its chin. I remember that the Sun Sovereign of the Leo constellation can give the wielder the ability to reflect all weapons. It's a pretty good ability. I see. Wu Ming nodded. Then give this to 16th Knight. Chapter 841. Wait. Why are you giving it to me? 16th Knights frowned. Was he looking down on him? 16th Knights, you're the only one who fights with your bare hands. You're the most suitable person to receive the gift of reflecting weapons. Wu Ming explained. Among the people present, if they didn't have long-range attacks, they had weapons and items. Only 16 Knights relied on his code unknown blessing to fight with his fists. Then I don't want it. 16th Knights put his hands behind his head and looked like he was saying, what can you do if I don't want it? Everyone smiled helplessly. He was indeed a problematic child. Wu Ming shook his head helplessly. Then, I'll have the sovereignty of the sun for now. Does anyone have any objections? 16th Knights immediately waved his hand. No objections, no objections. Everyone else nodded. Only Pest, who was angry but didn't dare to say anything, was looking forward to it. But when he saw Wu Ming's face, Pest was afraid and didn't dare to say anything. Then this meeting is over. Thank you for your hard work, everyone. Ren nodded. We also have to do some work for the return of the no-name flag. After all, the return of the no-name flag was a huge change for the no-name and the outside world. And the one who prepared for this change was naturally the leader of the community, Ren. Young Master Ren, I'll help later. Black Rabbit volunteered. She basically had nothing to do anyway. I'll help too. Lily also raised her little hand. Thank you for your hard work. Do your best. Jiufei Niao smiled. Do your best. Haruai Hiroyuki nodded expressionlessly. If you're free, why don't you come and help everyone? You two problematic children. Black Rabbit showed an angry and helpless expression. But the two pretended not to hear. Black Rabbit was used to it and didn't bother with the two anymore. Then, Black Rabbit turned her gaze to the more reliable Wu Ming. But, I said let's duel 16th Knights. Wu Ming suddenly looked at 16th Knights. Oh. 16th Knight's eyes suddenly lit up. Hey. Everyone was shocked. Wait a minute. Why do you want to duel all of a sudden? Black Rabbit looked at Wu Ming at a loss. This didn't happen all of a sudden, Black Rabbit. 16th Knights raised her head and closed her eyes. Then 16th Knights looked at Wu Ming. This is a continuation of the unfinished fight between men. Wu Ming shrugged and admitted this point. Although that's part of the reason, the main reason is that 16th Knight rejected my proposal, which made me very unhappy. Then, Wu Ming stretched out 2 fingers and pointed at 16 Knights. The winner will be able to command the winner to do anything, and the loser will have to give the winner a gift as a reward for winning. What do you think? It was different from the simple, if you lose, you have to be obedient. There was also an additional reward. What an interesting condition. I like it. 16 Knights placed her palms on the table, her eyes burning with the flames of war. But then, 16th Knights showed a distressed expression. However, I don't have any extra rewards. How about this? Black Rabbit and I had a gift competition before the Fire Dragon's birth ceremony. I received the command to command Black Rabbit to do anything except perverted things. How about this as a reward? 16th Knights emphasized on the word perverted. The falling clock tower that Wu Ming caught with psychokinesis was the masterpiece of the gift competition between 16th Knights and Black Rabbit. Don't emphasize it on purpose. Black Rabbit was on the verge of breaking down. She felt that she had embarrassed herself. No problem. Wu Ming agreed without hesitation. Don't agree so quickly. Black Rabbit wanted to cry but had no tears. Then, how about we use a countdown to see who can cause more damage to the other in the given time? Wu Ming suggested. After all, they were partners. They couldn't really kill each other. But if they didn't kill each other, they wouldn't be able to finish the competition in a short time. Therefore, a countdown was the best solution. A countdown? It doesn't matter. As long as we can fight each other. 16th Knight smiled as she rubbed her palms. As she finished speaking, 2 pieces of parchment appeared in front of Wu Ming and 16th Knights. It was the contract for the competition. Gift game name. Duel between the two. Use any method to cause damage to the other party in the given time. Contestants. Villo Saransword, 16th Knights reverse winning condition. After the given time, the damage will be less. Winning reward. Command the loser to do anything one time. Failure penalty. Provide any gift to the winner. Oath. Respect the above content. Based on the judgment of the court system, the gift game will be held. Because there was no organizer, the community at the end was blank. After checking that there were no mistakes, the parchment in front of the two burned instantly. That meant that the contract was in effect. All right. Without further ado, let's start. 16th Knight said and walked towards the door. They couldn't fight in the house, right? Wait a minute. Mr. 16th Knights, can't we not fight? Black Rabbit asked anxiously. Even though it was a sparring session, Black Rabbit still didn't want to see her companions hurt each other. But Wu Ming shook his head. Black Rabbit, you have to know that 16th Knights is a problematic child. He won't listen to you. Hearing Wu Ming's words, Black Rabbit turned to look at Wu Ming. Mr. Villo, you just came back from the North District not long ago. Isn't it good for everyone to rest for a while? But this time it was 16th Knight's turn to speak. Black Rabbit, Villo is the most problematic child. You have to know that he was the one who started this fight. I just agreed to it. With a presumptuous smile, 16th Knight pushed open the door and walked out without saying anything. Black Rabbit still wanted to say something to 16th Knights, but 16th Knights left the room and closed the door. Wait. Black Rabbit helplessly reached out a hand to the empty door. Sighing, Black Rabbit looked at Wu Ming again. Really, Mr. Villo, you also said. But Black Rabbit's voice stopped abruptly, because Black Rabbit realized that Wu Ming also disappeared. Master just left using the portal, Black Rabbit. Letitia kindly explained to Black Rabbit. Wu Ming left using the portal when Black Rabbit turned to look at 16th Knights. I'll go check on the two of them, Haruai Toshi said and left with Sanmao in his arms. I'm interested in a fight between two freaks. Jiu Yuanfei nodded elegantly at the crowd and left with Haruai Toshi. Then, excuse me. After saying that, Letitia stood up and left. It seemed that she was also going to watch. Only Pest, who didn't have much presence, and Run and Lily, who had some conscience, were still there. Black Rabbit, who was exhausted, completely gave up. Black Rabbit sat in her seat, leaned on the table, and yelled as if she had given up. Ah, really? Black Rabbit doesn't want to care about these problematic adults anymore. Run and Lily could only smile helplessly. Only Pester remained sulking in his place, jabbing his finger. Sun sovereignty. I need it too. Chapter 842. 16th Knights and Wu Ming walk side by side in the no-name corridor. Although the two were about to duel, Wu Ming and 16th Knights were companions after all. Naturally, they would not destroy their friendship because of a mere duel. Speaking of which, have you figured out the other party's goal? 16th Knights asked as he walked with his hands in his pockets. 16th Knights was not talking about Galji's own goal, but the goal of the person behind Galji. It seems like they want Galji and the others to unlock the seal of the final trial. However, the key items are our flag and the sun's sovereignty. Their plot has basically been destroyed. After all, the key items had been traded by Wu Ming. Because the other party's plan had been destroyed, Wu Ming did not go into detail in the meeting just now. Putting aside the sovereignty of the sun, the flag of No Name was unique. After the flag returned to No Name, stealing the flag would no longer work. The only way to obtain it again was through transfer, trade, or a gift competition. However, the first two were impossible. If it was a gift competition, only the Demon King would force others to participate in the gift competition with the flag. And with Wu Ming and the other main forces, there was no need to be afraid. Or rather, if a Demon King were to attack now, it would be exactly what No Name wanted. After all, the slogan of defeating the Demon King had already been spread. They had to defeat more Demon Kings. However, it was not that easy to encounter a Demon King. If a Demon King came knocking on their door, they would be very grateful. Did you not get any information about the person behind Galji from him? 16th Knights continued to ask. It was normal for 16th Knights to pay attention to information. After all, 16th Knights was a smart person. If 16th Knights was still in No Name during this time, Wu Ming would not have looked for White Yiksha first, but 16th Knights. If there is, I already said it. Let's not talk about the other party being very careful and not leaving any clues. Wu Ming denied 16th Knights. After all, most of the information came from Wu Ming, and the others after a series of verifications. Galji and the others did not tell Wu Ming any information. Also, Galji refused to reveal any information. Wu Ming felt that Galji just didn't know. After all, he was just a prop that had been monitored for less than 3 years. Although Wu Ming had thought of trading for some other information, such as Maxwell's, before Wu Ming could ask, Galji directly refused to provide any information to Wu Ming. According to Galji, the two parties were only doing a simple barter transaction. Actually, it could also be considered as Wu Ming's bargaining chip, not being heavy enough. Ling and Aurora exchanged for the No Name flag, Letitia's divinity, the sovereignty of the Ophiuchus constellation, and the sovereignty of the Leo constellation Sunday. Regardless of the quantity, just based on the value, Wu Ming had already gained a huge advantage. Galji, on the other hand, probably wanted to regain some face and indirectly refused to provide Wu Ming with the information. Don't you just want a simple transaction? Then let's just make a simple deal. One hand for the money, and the other for the goods. No money? Then I don't have any goods here either. Thank you for your patronage. Wu Ming was quite dissatisfied with this, but thinking that he could get the No Name flag back this time, Galji's little tricks were nothing. What Wu Ming didn't know was that every gift that Galji gave Wu Ming was something that he had previously planned or had practical abilities. But just because he saw Wu Ming, he was forced to give all these gifts to Wu Ming. It could be said that Wu Ming had skinned a layer of his skin. If Wuming knew the bitterness in Galji's heart, he would only think that Galji reaped what he sowed. After all, a layer of skin could be considered Wuming giving Galji a small punishment for attacking the box and attacking No Name. In short, it's all over. 16 Knights took the opportunity to take it. What we need to pay attention to now is fighting. Fighting. Seems like you've been waiting for this for a long time. Wuming couldn't help but smile. This time, 16th Knights was probably going to vent all the dissatisfaction that he had been holding in since the last fight. Then Wuming suggested, "Let's fight in my fixed barrier. You can do whatever you want there. The Colosseum from last time." 16 Knights was naturally talking about the 6th floor of Nazalik, where the two-headed dragon army was trapped at the fire dragon birth ceremony. "Let's not go there this time. Let's go somewhere else," Wuming said. Golden ripples appeared around him, and the twisted golden staff with the 7-headed dragon coiled around it automatically floated out. Grabbing it, Wuming tapped the ground with the tip of the staff. Wave-like ripples spread out and surrounded Wuming and 16 Knights. The next second, the two disappeared. Just as they turned the corner, Komodo Asuka and Haruai Biao looked at each other in confusion. I clearly saw the two of them walk over. Could it be that they discovered us? Master and 16 Knights went into Master's fixed barrier. Letitia explained as she walked out from behind them. As Wuming's dependent, Letitia could sense Wuming's location. That Colosseum? Komodo Asuka naturally remembered how Wuming brought them to another space during the fire dragon birth ceremony. "Letitia, can't you bring us in?" Haruai Biao asked as if he was asking for help. However, Letitia shook her head. "Unfortunately, that's an ability brought by Master's grace. I can't interfere." "So, we can only wait until the two of them finish fighting?" Komodo Asuka sighed helplessly. Staff of Ain's Wuming, the 8th floor of the fixed barrier. In the endless wilderness, Wuming and 16 Knights faced each other with a distance of more than 10 meters. This place is quite spacious. 16 Knights was quite satisfied. There were no plants, animals, and even the ground was dead. They could do whatever they wanted. This is the fixed barrier of the Staff of Ain's Wuming. Some are suitable for fighting, while some are suitable for resting. Wuming said as he put the Staff of Ain's Wuming into the golden ripple that opened up again. Then Wuming snapped his fingers and activated the advanced tool creation ability. A huge hourglass suddenly appeared in the sky. Use this as a timer. Wuming looked at 16 Knights. However, 16 Knights didn't care. "It doesn't matter. Let's start." 16 Knights showed a very happy smile to Wuming. Then, with one hand raised, Wuming and 16 Knights looked at each other. Neither of them spoke nor did they move. "Let's start dash." As soon as he said that, Wuming snapped his fingers and the hourglass began to operate. Bang dash, the sound of the ground being crushed was heard. 16 Knights' speed was comparable to the speed of Universe 3 as she instantly burst toward Wuming's position. The battle was about to start. Chapter 843. Boom! 16 Knights rushed to Wuming's side with the speed of the third universe, and smashed his fist down. The place where Wuming was standing instantly exploded, and smoke and dust filled the air. As the smoke and dust slowly dispersed, 16 Knights' fist was pressed on the broken ground. And Wuming was nowhere to be seen. Still so impatient, 16 Knights. Wuming's figure floated in the sky as he teleported away. It's a countdown match after all. I have to seize the time and enjoy the fun of fighting. 16 Knights shook his arm. Because he was a bit agitated, he used a bit more strength to smash the ground. Wuming, who was floating in the sky with psychokinesis, released his power of the will completely, and spread it to the ground that 16 Knights had punched. Although the ground didn't seem to be broken that badly, and only the surface cracked, Wuming could see through his power of the will that a crack went deep into the ground. Wuming began to wonder if 16 Knights would break through this place. The staff of Anzi-Ergen's enchantment was connected to the 10 underground floors of Nazalik. It didn't mean that Wuming could only use it on the 8th floor, and not the other floors. With 16 Knights' fist, if he really wanted to break through this place, Wuming wouldn't have any doubts. Of course, if Wuming kept supplying mana to maintain the enchantment, The enchantment could still be repaired if it wasn't broken through in one go. Just like now. The ground under 16 Knights' feet seemed to have gone back in time as it slowly returned to its original state. Can this place repair itself? That's not fun. 16 Knights was a bit dissatisfied. Why? Things that are broken automatically repair themselves. That's not fun at all. It turned out that 16 Knights was a problematic child, and he was the violent type. Then I won't let it repair itself. It'll save my mana. That's what you wanted. Wuming smiled helplessly. Wuming immediately stopped supplying mana to the enchantment to repair itself. That's more like it. 16th Knights laughed wantonly as he bent his knees and jumped. A large scale of cracks appeared on the ground as 16th Knights rushed into the sky. Unable to fly, he could only rely on this method to attack Wuming. Without any fancy moves, 16 Knights' weapon was just his fists. Facing 16 Knights, Wuming responded with the same method of attack, punching. The two unadorned fists collided with each other, causing the entire atmosphere to tremble. Visible shockwaves spread out in all directions with their fists as the dividing line. Boom! After a short stalemate, the two separated. Because 16th Knights was a human, just a slightly special human, he naturally couldn't overcome the gravity of the ground. Thus, 16th Knight's body began to automatically descend to the ground. Wuming, on the other hand, couldn't help but go a little higher due to the inertia from the exchange of blows with 16 Knights. Being able to fly is indeed a good thing, 16th Knights, who was kneeling on one knee, teased Wuming. I didn't think of using this to take advantage of you. Because 16th Knights was so aggressive, Wuming subconsciously used the teleportation door to go to the sky. Wuming finished speaking and landed on the ground. Both of them suffered some damage from the exchange of blows, but Wuming's injury was more serious. Shaking his numb right hand, Wuming smiled helplessly. Sure enough, in terms of explosive power, you have the upper hand. If Wuming didn't have the advantage of being in the air, Wuming would be the first to retreat. However, compared to Wuming, who came to the ground to fight with 16th Knights, 16th Knights didn't have the idea of being waterproof. I won't go easy on you. 16th Knights pretended to rush over again. I don't need you to go easy on me either. Wuming swung his fist and met 16th Knight's second punch. Boom! Just like before, the ground was split by the shockwave. At the same time, the ground couldn't withstand the impact of the two and shattered, sending rocks flying everywhere. However, this time, the ground didn't recover. On the contrary, a large number of rocks that flew into the sky fell and buried the two of them. Crash! Wuming released his magic and bounced the rocks away. He wasn't hurt at all. What a convenient ability. 16th Knights, who crawled out of the rocks, said enviously. Although he wasn't hurt, 16th Knights, who didn't have the ability to release energy, was in a sorry state. I have many abilities. Moreover, this is just a simple way to release energy. Wuming smiled and didn't mind. Is that so? Speaking of which, is the glowing rune on your body one of your abilities? 16th Knights pointed at Wuming's arm. Wuming raised his hands. Sure enough, there were some runes on Wuming's hands. It's just a lune rune for strengthening. It only increases strength. I used it when I fought with you before. With the strengthening of the lune rune, Wuming wouldn't be at a disadvantage when fighting with 16th Knights. I didn't pay attention at the time. Forget it, it doesn't matter. It's just a strengthening rune. Watch me break it. 16th Knights said and rushed over again. Come and try. Wuming responded with his fist. The battle was still ongoing. Just as Wuming said before that he wouldn't take advantage of 16th Knights, Wuming didn't use any fancy abilities. He just fought with 16th Knights using his fists. Although their attacks were blocked by each other's fists, it was still a response to 16th Knight's request. 16th Knights also used his fists to fight with Wuming. Or rather, he simply didn't have any other abilities. However, 16th Knights didn't need any other abilities. His body was the best weapon. Reality proved that it was just as 16 Knights had said. He would break these runes for Wuming. Breaking the lune rune wasn't a joke. However, every time Wuming's lune rune was broken, Wuming would immediately use telekinesis to inscribe a new lune rune on his body. Gradually, the entire 8th layer of the wilderness was affected by the battle between the two. Basically, there wasn't a single place that was intact. There were craters left behind by fists and legs everywhere. The better places were full of spiderweb-like cracks, and the worse places were completely shattered into pieces. As for the deeper underground, there was no need to guess. It was probably also fragmented. Because Wu Ming cut off the supply of mana to repair the enchantment, the shattered ground of the 8th layer didn't automatically repair itself. Gradually, the 8th layer couldn't hold on any longer. Ka. The sound of something heavy breaking entered their ears. 16th Knights, who was temporarily separated from Wu Ming, panted heavily with a puzzled expression. What's wrong? Is this place going to collapse? You guessed right. Wu Ming, who was also panting heavily, responded with a smile. After Wu Ming said that, the entire 8th layer collapsed. Chapter 844. Generally speaking, if it was a multi-story building, once a floor collapsed, the people on that floor would automatically fall to the next floor due to gravity. However, Nazalik's underground tomb was a magical underground building transformed from the game into reality. Therefore, it couldn't be defined by common sense. As mentioned before, it wasn't just the 8th floor that didn't mean the other floors of Nazalik didn't exist anymore. It must be known that once the staff of Anziergen's inherent enchantment was activated, it would directly open the 10 underground floors of Nazalik. If only one floor was used, the other floors would be idle and wouldn't disappear or exist. When one floor was destroyed, there were two possibilities for the people in the inherent enchantment. One was to be transferred out of the inherent enchantment, and the other was to be transferred to the other floors. By the way, Wu Ming could control which floor they were transferred to. After the 8th floor collapsed, it completely turned into magic and dissipated. The 8th floor was equivalent to being empty. After all, the 8th floor needed time to repair itself after being destroyed. Of course, if Wu Ming transferred a large amount of magic, the self-repair time would be greatly reduced. Of course, the easiest way was to reactivate Nazalik's inherent enchantment after it was closed. After leaving the 8th floor, Wu Ming and 16 Knights didn't return to No Name. Instead, they went to the other floors of Nazalik. 9th floor, a lounge in the royal suite. Wu Ming and 16 Knights' figures automatically appeared. The two sat face to face on a sofa with a coffee table. Great. Ha ha ha. I haven't been this happy in a long time. 16 Knights sat on the sofa and shouted happily. 16 Knights had been bored in her original world for 16 years. Moreover, the bet between 16 Knights and Wu Ming had been delayed for a long time. With the two added together, 16 Knights' mood was very good at the moment. I'm finally done with you. You don't use your brain at all when you fight. As the person involved in the fight with 16 Knights, Wu Ming felt it deeply. Aren't you the same? 16th Knights laughed happily as she looked at Wu Ming. Indeed, Wu Ming had almost released the bestial nature engraved deep within him. After all, Wu Ming wasn't human. It couldn't be helped that he didn't dare. Fighting each other with fists without weapons was the best way to arouse blood. Fortunately, Wu Ming managed to control himself. Otherwise, the match would have been over. Oh, I didn't expect you to have such a good place. 16 Knights, who was done laughing, began to pay attention to her surroundings. Although Wu Ming didn't know why 16th Knights had such knowledge, Wu Ming could tell that 16th Knights was shocked by the excellence of the VIP suites on the 9th floor. After all, this was a place for players to escape from reality. Naturally, they would make it more comfortable. I kind of inherited it. This is all designed by the predecessors. Leaning on the sofa, Wu Ming snapped his fingers. 2 glasses of wine appeared in front of Wu Ming and 16th Knights. This is a place to rest. Water and wine are provided for free. Wu Ming explained. Of course, there was only water and wine. After all, this was a game. There was no such thing as eating, so they could only drink some water and wine. If there's such a good place, you should have brought me here earlier, 16th Knight said as she unceremoniously raised her wine glass. Then you and the two of them would have caused a ruckus here. Wu Ming also responded without holding back. The two of them naturally referred to Jiu Asuka and Kasuga Hibiya, The two problem children. Ha ha ha, how could that be? You have to believe me. We are companions. 16th Knights waved her hand jokingly. Speaking of which, I was tricked by you in the end. The last thing 16th Knights was referring to was the fight just now. When the fight between the two broke on the 8th floor, there was only a bit of sand left in the hourglass. Then 16th Knights discovered that she was healed by something. What 16th Knights didn't know was that Nazalik's teleportation never had any light. It was just a sudden disappearance. Therefore, the light that appeared when the 8th floor broke wasn't a sign of teleportation. It was the activation of the healing rune that Wuming designed in advance. That was the Lune rune that Wuming buried in the ground while fighting with 16th Knights. Wuming intentionally lured 16th Knights to not stay in the same place to fight. Moreover, 16th Knights, who was lured by Wuming, wouldn't go to the same place to fight. Only then would the healing runes in every inch of the 8th floor not be destroyed by 16th Knights. It was precisely because Wuming and 16th Knights didn't continue fighting in the same place that their fight affected the entire 8th floor. In the end, the healing rune was activated. The hourglass in the sky also ran out of sand, and the time was up. Then, if I didn't guess wrong, the result should be a draw. 16th Knights set as a contract appeared in front of 16th Knights. Sure enough, there were two victors on the contract. Victors, Vilob Silensword, 16 Knights in reverse. However, there was no such thing as a draw in the gift competition. So the two of them were also losers. Losers, Vilob Silensword, 16 Knights in reverse. In this way, both sides could order the other side once. What a pity. I originally wanted to heal myself in the end. I didn't expect to include you in the healing range. Wuming drank a mouthful of wine without blushing. I almost believed you. 16th Knights smiled casually and drank the wine in one gulp. The victory condition on the contract was like this. Victory condition. After the time is up, the damage taken will be less. Wuming had implanted healing runes in the shattered ground of the 8th floor. When these healing runes were activated, the effect was to completely heal the two of them. In this way, after the time was up, the two of them would be the ones who didn't receive any damage. Hey, this is completely the same as when I competed with Black Rabbit. 16th Knights was quite depressed. A competition was to determine the winner and loser. Why would it be a draw every day? But this time, 16th Knights was quite happy, so 16th Knights didn't want to pursue Wuming. Here, this is Black Rabbit's command authority. 16th Knights took out a piece of parchment from the gift card and threw it to Wuming. Alright, give me the sovereignty of Leo's Sunday, 16th Knights said bluntly as he extended his hand towards Wuming. You guessed it. Wuming took out a ball of light and threw it to 16th Knights. Even an idiot can see that you want to give me the sovereignty of the Leo constellation Sunday. That's why you want to compete with me. I'm just curious as to how you lost the sovereignty of the sun to me. Chapter 845. Just like how Wuming sent Ophiuchus constellation's Sun Sovereign into Letitia's body, 16 Knights merged the Sun Sovereign into his own body. Indeed, Wuming never thought of using the Sun Sovereign from the start. After knowing that Leo constellation's Sun Sovereign could deflect weapons, Wuming's first thought was to reverse 16 Knights. Firstly, 16 Knights was the most suitable for Leo constellation's Sun Sovereign, but there was another more important reason. After all, Wuming couldn't stay in the box world forever, but the rest of No Name could. After he left, No Name would have to rely on his companions. Thus, Wuming would leave whatever he could for them. Of course, Wuming also didn't need the Sun Sovereign. You can't be too obsessed with power, but you can't run away from your own power. Wuming's advice to Letitia had the same effect on Wuming. Since the Sun Sovereign couldn't give Wuming more power, it was like a chicken rib, so it was better to give it to the rest of No Name. Thus, Wuming was glad that he didn't fight with 16 Knights. If he did, there would have been a winner. In that case, he wouldn't have been able to give 16 Knights the Sun Sovereign of Leo constellation. After all, normal methods couldn't make 16 Knights accept the Sun Sovereign of Leo constellation. Wuming had no choice but to use this method to understand the agreement between him and 16 Knights. Now you know what method I used. After replying to 16 knights, Wuming drank all the wine in his cup. Although I know, it's a fact that I was tricked by you. It's really annoying. 16 knights smiled proudly. Look, even if he was tricked, 16 knights would still continue to smile. As for the reason, let's make it clear in advance. Next time, you have to fight with me properly. No one is going easy. Use your full strength. 16 knights' tone was serious. His eyes were burning with fighting spirit. It seemed like he was going to fight for real. After all, they had already experienced fighting each other. Next, they would have to fight with real swords and spears. 16 knights didn't only use his fists to fight, he still had trump cards he hadn't used yet. Forget it. If we really fought like that, Black Rabbit would cry herself dry. Wuming shook his head. One had to know that a real fight was no joke. Wuming and 16 knights were both strong in the box. If they fought, they would be injured would be light, but they would definitely be heavily injured. Their lives might even be in danger. Although 16 knights was indeed looking for excitement, the two of them were not mortal enemies. There was no need to fight to the death, right? Previously in the conference room, Black Rabbit was about to cry when he found out that Wu Ming and 16 knights were going to fight. If it really came to a real fight like 16 knights said, Black Rabbit might really cry. Forget it then. We'll talk about it later. 16th knights, who seemed to have thought of something, also chose to give up. It's about time. We should go out. Wuming realized that the two had been away from No Name for a long time. It was time to go back. Hey, you should have other spaces. Why don't you take me for a walk? 16 knights said as her eyes lit up. Wuming showed a helpless expression, because Wuming knew that this was the light of a problem child. No Name's headquarters. Wuming and 16 knights left the corridor. The two of them seemed to have removed their invisibility and appeared out of thin air. In the end, Wuming didn't take 16 knights for a walk. After all, if the other two problem children found out about this, they would either have a falling out or pester Wuming all the time. It's really unfair. Since 16 knights also visited your private space, we have to do the same. At that time, the two of them would probably say something like that. If that's the case, why not refuse from the beginning? That's what Wuming thought. However, 16 knights began to fuss over this. You're really boring. You were so bold when you were fighting. 16 knights' expression was as if she encountered something boring. To put it simply, she was quite bored. Didn't I say that Nazalik's enchantment is just a big tomb? There's really nothing to see. Wuming sighed helplessly and tried to persuade her again. As if there was no other way, Wuming used his trump card. If you're really not happy, I can find White Yiksha to fight with you. I don't want to fight White Yiksha now. I still have self-awareness. Although 16 knights said so, the smile on her face told Wuming that 16 knights was not afraid of fighting White Yiksha. Wuming didn't care much about it. After thinking for a while, he said to 16 knights, "Our flag has returned anyway. Presumably, there will be a lot of gift competitions that you need to participate in. As an organization, the most important thing for a community was its name and flag. The community's name and flag could be used for publicity to make the community more famous and drive the development of the community. In the past, because the flag and name of No Name had been taken away, they could only use the slogan "Down with the Demon King" to promote themselves. Now that the flag had been recovered, they had to vigorously promote themselves. And the best way to advertise was to win a large number of gift contests. After all, the gift contest was the main theme of the Suitland world. Only by winning the gift contest and showing their strength would the people of the Suitland remember them and be valued by other communities. Only then could they develop themselves. Even if No Name still didn't have a name, as long as the logo on the No Name flag was shown. Of course, it didn't mean that the slogan "Down with the Demon King" that No Name previously advertised was invalid. It was just a two-pronged approach. That's true. We have to get busy. When it came to the gift competition, 16 knights would become excited. But then 16 knights looked at Wuming again. You just said you, right? Then what are you going to do? Don't tell me you're going to leave again? 16 knights had a smile on his face, but his eyes revealed a trace of seriousness. As a smart person, when 16 Knights first saw Wu Ming leave, he deduced that Wu Ming had something he couldn't let go of in the outside world. Wu Ming wasn't like the three of them. When he was first invited to the boxings, he was already prepared to give up everything in the outside world. Although Wu Ming said that he came to the boxings because of a letter, after Wu Ming left the boxings, 16 Knights asked Black Rabbit how many letters were sent. The result was naturally 3 letters. In other words, if Wu Ming didn't lie, the one who used the letter to invite him definitely wasn't Black Rabbit. Of course, it couldn't be said that Wu Ming was lying to them. After all, Wu Ming said from the beginning that he came to the boxings to find his body. But this also meant that after finding his body, even if he didn't leave no name, he wouldn't stay in the boxings for a long time. For now, I won't leave for the time being. Wu Ming shook his head. No matter what, Wu Ming came this time to find his original body. No matter what, he had to find his original body first. Also, Wu Ming looked in the direction of his room. He still hadn't completed that person's request. Chapter 846. No Name Headquarters. Wu Ming's room. Vera sat alone on Wu Ming's bed, quietly waiting outside the window. Gotcha. The door opened, and Vera subconsciously turned her head. It was Wu Ming. Vera used a bit of strength and jumped from the bed to the ground. She ran to Wu Ming's side in an extremely cute manner. Welcome back, Vera said as she pulled on Wu Ming's sleeve. I'm back. But after saying that, Wu Ming felt that something was wrong. This was supposed to be his room. How did Vera manage to turn the tables on him? But it didn't matter. After laughing at himself, Wu Ming squatted down and apologized to Wu Ming. I'm sorry, Vera, for leaving you here alone. Before, when Lily came to find Wu Ming and told him that everyone else had returned, Wu Ming first brought Lily and Vera to Pest's room, and found Pest who was still sulking. Then, Wu Ming brought the 3 of them to his room, and found Letitia who was cleaning the room. After that, Wu Ming, who had the intention to hold a meeting that belonged to No Name, left Vera, who was not a member of No Name, in his room. Although the meeting just now wasn't that important, and Wu Ming did agree to let Vera stay by his side, it was still a matter of principle. Wu Ming bringing the leader of the northern community into his own community was already against the rules in the eyes of ordinary people. He couldn't possibly bring the leader of the northern community into his own community's meeting. It's fine. Regardless of whether Vera understood the depth of Wu Ming's apology or not, Vera didn't seem to blame Wu Ming. Finally, Wu Ming looked at Vera's pair of eyes that were the color of willow. The wisps rather seriously. Then next, let's go settle Maxwell's matter once and for all. After separating from Wu Ming, 16th Knights returned to the previous conference room. Opening the door as expected, only Hey Bunny and Run were in the conference room dealing with matters. Mr. 16th Knights, did you and Mr. Villo finish fighting? In fact, it wasn't like what Wu Ming said before, that a long time had passed. He and 16th Knights didn't fight for long. In fact, it was just the principle of happy times always pass by quickly. However, it was also because Wu Ming deliberately shortened the duel time. Although I don't want to admit it, happy times are always short. Shrugging with a smile, 16th Knight walked to her seat at the conference table and sat down. In short, I'm here also came to help. With the return of the no-name flag, not only did they need to participate in the bestowment competition in the future, there were also various miscellaneous matters that needed to be dealt with and prepared in advance. Although Wu Ming did not explicitly point this out, 16 Knights was clear about it, and Run the Black Rabbit was dealing with these matters. And Mr. 16th Knights also came to help. Hey Bunny was a little worried since she was a problem child. She looked at Jiao Fei Niao and Haruai Buyao and left. Hey Black Rabbit, no matter what, I'm still a smart person. Be careful, or I'll rip your ear off. 16 Knights grinned, looking like he was joking at the same time. Ears can't be. Hey Bunny panicked and covered her ears. That? 16th Knights, come and help. Ren smiled awkwardly and wiped a drop of cold sweat from his forehead. You don't have to take 16th Knight's words seriously, but if you don't take it seriously, then 16th Knights will take it seriously. And there was one more thing to know. Although her fists were fiercer than most of the people in No Name, 16th Nights was indeed smart. I misunderstood Mr. 16th Nights. It's Hey Bunny's fault. Who told you problem children to always do things that annoy people? 16th Nights felt that Hey Bunny's annoyance was actually referring to her ears. Okay, I'll pull your ears if you keep talking. I know. Don't always covet Hey Bunny's ears. Speaking of which, Ren opened his mouth again. Where did Mr. Villo go? 16th Nights picked up a document on the table and answered without looking up. He went to find his body. Leaving this sentence that confused Hey Bunny and Ren, 16th Nights began to work. North District, 54545, Outer Realm Gate Square. It was already night time, because the Devil King's attack had already retreated, but after all, the Devil King's attack had just ended, so there were still not many people using the Realm Gate. There were only some community members who came to help Salamandra deal with the aftermath. Among them, there was no lack of community members who belonged to the same class as Salamandra, which was ironic. Black and purple ripples appeared in a corner of the Realm Gate Square. Wuming and Vera walked out of the teleportation gate. After all, they had been here once, so Wuming's teleportation gate could be used. Let's go, Vera, let's walk around the city. Hearing Wuming's words, Vera could not help but tighten her grip on Wuming's sleeves, as if she was afraid of being left behind. Don't worry, Vera, as long as that Maxwell guy appears, I will definitely take care of him this time. Vera hesitated, but in the end, she nodded silently. Before coming to the North District, Wuming told Vera to be bait to lure Maxwell out, but Vera was 100% unwilling. As a last resort, Wuming could only persuade her and repeatedly promise her, as well as entice her by buying snacks. Finally, Vera reluctantly agreed, but there was nothing he could do about it. According to the information he gathered, Maxwell was only interested in Vera, so he could only use Vera as bait. Although it was bait, Wuming was not prepared to let the fish eat the bait. But why did Wuming choose the 54545 Outer Realm as the location of the operation? Firstly, it was because there was a familiar local snake, Salamandra, so it was easier to get things done. Secondly, Wuming was still very worried about the seal of absolute evil. If the enemy's plan was really to release absolute evil, Wuming did not think that the other party would give up. Even if there was no key item to lift the seal, Wuming did not think that the other party would give up so easily. One must know that the box court was a world full of miracles. Maxwell alone, the 4-digit Demon King, had a resurrection ability that Wuming could not understand. He had not found the original body yet, so he was very suspicious of whether the person behind Maxwell and the others had more strange unknown methods. Of course, if Wuming overestimated the other party, then it was nothing. He could just treat it as taking Vera shopping. In short, it was always right to be cautious. Immediately, Wuming brought Vera to stroll around the city. How did the two of them enter the city? Wuming's teleportation door was super useful. Wuming was very interested in the city. After all, the last time he came, Wuming did not have a good look around. Chapter 847. Needless to say, the name of the City of Glowing Flames matched the current situation of the city very well. Numerous ironworks covered the entire city of glowing flames. Flames emerged from the ironworks and dyed the entire city of glowing flames in the color of flames. Then Wuming lifted his head and looked at the huge chandelier hanging in the middle of the city. The environment in the North District is extremely harsh. It's said that the City of Glowing Flames actually relies on this huge chandelier to maintain its heat, Wuming explained to Vera. However, as someone from the North District, Vera actually didn't need Wuming's introduction. Even so, Vera didn't interrupt him. However, Wuming quickly realized this. I almost forgot that you're from the North District. Wuming laughed awkwardly. At that moment, Wuming stopped explaining to Vera. After all, this was completely showing off in front of Master Guan. The two of them walked like this, taking a stroll, and enjoying the scenery around them. The warm colors brought about by the ironworks and the huge chandelier made Wuming unable to feel the slightest bit of coldness. Moreover, coupled with the desolate but simple North District land, the visual effect was pretty good to Wuming. Wuming, who was used to the warm spring scenery of the East District, felt that the scenery in front of him had a different flavor. However, apart from these, there were other sceneries, such as the restored buildings and the buildings that were being restored. To be able to restore the damage caused by the Demon King's attack so quickly, it can be said that they're quite capable. Wu Ming couldn't help but sigh. One had to know that the Demon King's attack on the outer gate of the 54545 division happened during the day. However, the entire city of glowing flames was almost restored by tonight. This was a completely different world from the Fire Dragon birth ceremony held between the 399-9999 division and the 4000000 division. Wu Ming even suspected that the Fire Dragon birth ceremony was still in ruins. After all, there wasn't any strong community between the outer gates. With no intention of helping, Wu Ming continued to stroll around with Vera. After all, seducing Maxwell was their main goal. However, as they strolled around, Wu Ming and Vera arrived at Salamandra's headquarters in Blaze City. Perhaps due to the lack of manpower, there was only one member of Salamandra in charge of guarding the door. When this member of Salamandra saw a suspicious person loitering in front of his house, he immediately became vigilant. What person? However, when he saw that it was Wu Ming, he immediately exclaimed. Although Wu Ming was not very clear about it, the matter of him and Ren causing a ruckus at the Fire Dragon birth ceremony in Salamandra could be said to have spread like wildfire throughout Salamandra. The Salamandra member swallowed his saliva and asked with a trembling voice. What business do you have with Salamandra? I was passing by, so I came to take a look. Don't worry, I don't mean any harm. Seeing the other party's expression as if he had seen a ghost, Wu Ming couldn't help but laugh. There might be a small situation later. After saying this softly, Wu Ming took Vera and left. Looking at Wu Ming and Vera leaving in the distance, the Salamandra member who was guarding the door felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted off his shoulders as he sat on the ground and panted heavily. That day at the Fire Dragon birth ceremony, he was one of the people who had to endure Wu Ming's pressure. He, who was left with a deep psychological shadow, was able to withstand it. He thought that he was already very impressive. He sat on the ground and rested for a short while. After checking that there were no suspicious people around, he immediately ran back to his home base. It seemed like he was going to report to his family. However, during the brief moment when no one was guarding the main door, a few indistinct figures in black appeared out of thin air at the main door. Following that, the few of them silently walked into Salamandra. One of the black-clothed figures parted ways with the others, and quietly walked in the direction that Wu Ming and Vera had left. And Wu Ming, who had already left the entrance of Salamandra, had already strolled around. Wu Ming and Vera began to walk towards the outskirts of Glowing Flame City. Reality proved that there really wasn't much to stroll around in Glowing Flame City that was full of ironworks. Wu Ming's excitement had already passed. It's almost time to go, Vera. Wu Ming suddenly said to Vera, which made Vera extremely puzzled. Vera tilted her head and looked at Wu Ming speechlessly, as if to say, "You don't need me to be the bait anymore?" After all, the other party might not really be near this door. Let's go somewhere else to take a look. However, as soon as he finished his words, a flame and frost attack suddenly attacked Wu Ming's face. Boom! The scorching flame and the bone-piercing frost reacted, and a violent explosion suddenly sounded. The mushroom-shaped explosion floated in the outskirts of Glowing Flame City, which was where Wu Ming and Vera were. Moreover, this explosion attracted the attention of the people in Glowing Flame City. At the same time, it also attracted the attention of the people in black who had sneaked into Salamandra. However, after realizing that the explosion was caused by their companion, the people in black calmed down and continued to sneak in. "Where do you think you're taking my bride?" A clown-like voice rang out, and at the same time, a clown-like figure appeared in the smoke produced by the explosion. "You really don't learn to be obedient, Maxwell." That's right, this person was Maxwell, whom Wu Ming had painstakingly searched for. At this moment he appeared in front of Wu Ming openly. Hugging Vera, Wu Ming floated by the mushroom cloud that was about to dissipate, and looked down at Maxwell, who was faintly visible in the smoke. As early as when he entered Glowing Flame City, Wuming had activated his mental power to the maximum. However, Wuming also knew that Maxwell had the ability to teleport, so he didn't expect to be able to catch him with his mental power, not to mention that the other party might have the gift of shielding him from detection. Therefore, Wuming chose to spread his mental power in a range of 1,000 meters around him. As long as someone approached, Wuming would definitely be able to detect it. However, in order to prevent Maxwell from using the gift of shielding him from detection, Wuming said, "It's about time to leave." After all, with Wuming's current understanding of Maxwell, if he was nearby, he would definitely appear after hearing this sentence. As expected, Maxwell launched an attack on Wuming. Moreover, Maxwell seemed to have used the gift of shielding him from detection. Before he launched the attack, Wuming didn't notice Maxwell's trace at all. However, with Maxwell's harmless attack and Wuming's extremely fast reaction speed, Maxwell's attack didn't have any effect at all. Of course, if it was just a greeting, Maxwell did a great job. "Ah, let go. My bride." Maxwell covered half of his face with one hand as if his mental state wasn't normal. Regarding this, Wuming frowned slightly and seemed to be somewhat dissatisfied. He still wanted to try to get some information about his main body from Maxwell, but Maxwell's mental state was already somewhat abnormal. However, the slightly abnormal Maxwell's intelligence seemed to have decreased, and his actions were more unscrupulous. This large-scale explosion was the best proof. However, even if Maxwell was unscrupulous, it didn't mean that Wuming was unscrupulous. He didn't want to fight with Maxwell in Flame City. "Maxwell, I'm going to bring Vera out of Flame City. You have to follow me," Wuming deliberately said as if he was mocking him. "If you really can't keep up with me, then Vera will belong to me." Although it was a joke, Vera's face still turned slightly red. After that, without waiting for Maxwell's reply, Wuming immediately opened the teleportation door and brought Vera out of Flame City. "My bride!" Maxwell shouted. His figure flashed and he disappeared as well. Without a doubt, he was chasing after Wuming, or rather Vera. Chapter 848. Inside Salamandra, the black-clothed men who had infiltrated Salamandra were quietly moving towards their designated location. Because a large number of people had been sent out to repair Raging Flame Capital, and because the explosion had attracted the attention of Salamandra, more people had been sent out. Coupled with the fact that the black-clothed men were moving towards an extremely remote area, the black-clothed men did not encounter many people along the way. And even if they did encounter people, with the black-clothed men's special gift of stealth, basically no one would be able to discover them. Salamandra's headquarters was a large palace made up of 12 palaces. When the black-clothed men sneaked into the 5th palace, they all stopped. Then, after some planning, they went deeper into the 5th palace. They went deeper and deeper, and finally arrived at a blind spot where there was a bronze statue. "We're here, right?" Among them, the black-clothed man who seemed to be the leader looked at the bronze statue in front of him and quietly asked. If Wuming was here, he would definitely be able to recognize the owner of this voice. It was Galji, who he had ruthlessly peeled off a layer of skin during the day. At the same time, Wuming would probably be able to guess what Galji and the others wanted to do. Break the seal of absolute evil. Most likely, this was the entrance to the seal. However, it was clear that the key items to break the seal could not be gathered, so how could they break the seal? The flag of the Alliance leader who defeated absolute evil returned to no name. And Galji also returned the sovereignty of the Ophiuchus constellation and the Leo constellation to Wuming. Even if they could obtain the horn of the Starry Sea Dragon King, there was no way to break the seal. After all, the items to break the seal were indispensable. However, since they came, they must have the confidence to break the seal. "It's right here, Your Highness," Belle said from the side. Then Galji looked at the other black-clothed man. "Elder Gu, please move this bronze statue away." However, the only person who could be called Elder Gu by Galji was the griffin with the genome tree engraved on its body. Although it was inconceivable, the black-clothed man who Galji spoke to was indeed the griffin from before. Why would it appear here in human form? It was probably a special gift item. "Yes," Elder Gu answered simply. Then he walked to the front of the bronze statue. The others also made way for Elder Gu to perform. Ling, how are the preparations going? It seemed that was what Galji was relying on to break the seal of absolute evil. Everything is ready, Ling said as she took out a gift card from her backpack. Then Ling started crying to Galji. However, Your Highness, that inside is seriously corroding my gift card. I'm afraid it won't be long before my gift card becomes useless. If White Yiksha heard these words, he would definitely be shocked. The gift card's full name was Laplace paper. It wasn't something that could be casually destroyed. However, the thing inside Belle's gift card was actually able to corrode the gift card. What was inside the gift card? Moreover, generally speaking, the gift card could disappear like a servant's spiritual form. It could be taken out at any time without worrying about losing it. However, it seemed that Ling's gift card couldn't do that at all because of the thing inside it. Is it that serious? Galji was surprised. You should know that we've offered ourselves as gift cards. The last black-clothed man, Aurora, who wanted to attack, no name, sighed helplessly. For the sake of that, basically everyone except His Highness had taken out their gift cards and used them as containers to move that. First they put that into a gift card, then used another gift card to store that. After that, they used another gift card to store the gift card. Simply put, it was a nesting doll. However, even so, the speed at which that eroded the gift card was beyond everyone's imagination. Naturally, the changes in the gift card could be perceived by its owner. Along the way, Maxwell's gift card was broken, followed by Aurora and Elder Ji's gift card. In the end, only Ling's gift card could barely be used. His Highness' gift card collected the things in other gift cards. After all, the gift card was very rare. Even Galji and the others used it to store their personal belongings. After contributing their gift cards, their belongings naturally had to be handed over to Galji to help store. But this also means that does indeed have an ability beyond our imagination. Galji was not worried but happy. Although that was the case, Ling's gift card was indeed reaching its limit. In the end, if only that bastard Maxwell could give us Pandora's box. Ling complained. Pandora's box was highly resistant to that. Or, it could be said that as a box that contained all calamities, Pandora's box had the ability to contain all calamities. It could be said that there was no calamity item that Pandora's box couldn't contain. After all, that was the very thing that Pandora's box transported to the lower levels. Although that's the case, Pandora's box is already full of holes. If it continues to be used, I'm afraid it will be destroyed. Galji had seen what Pandora's box looked like after that was taken out. He didn't dare to imagine that could corrode Pandora's box to such an extent. And Pandora's box still needs to be used to recover that. It can't be completely corroded. After all, this was an item that the higher-ups lent to them, and had to be returned to them in the end. Moreover, Maxwell had contributed his own gift card, so no one gossiped. It's clearly something that won't be used for long. It's obvious that the higher-ups are deliberately causing trouble for us. Ling complained rather angrily. The reason for causing trouble was naturally obvious. After all, they lost the item that the higher-ups gave them to unlock absolute evil. It's all that bastard's fault. If he didn't steal our item, we wouldn't have to work so hard. Ling was furious when she thought of that person. Of course, she was talking about Wu Ming. He captured her and Aurora to blackmail Galji into exchanging the item that belonged to No Name. In the end, he took away everything that they needed for their next plan. He was simply a robber. It was precisely because of this that they had no choice but to use that to unlock the seal of absolute evil. Since it's already like this, let's not talk about him anymore. Galji naturally didn't have a good impression of Wu Ming, but what Ling didn't know was that what Wu Ming said to Galji before she fainted still had some effect on Galji. And since we're already here, we can just release that later. Elder Gu advised in a calm voice. This was the only consolation that everyone had. Get ready, I'm going to push it away. As Elder Gu spoke, he exerted force with one hand. The bronze statue that Elder Gu was holding with both hands was pushed away without any movement. Or it was lifted and moved away. As a griffin, even if Elder Gu used a special gift to temporarily transform into a human form, he was still a griffin. Naturally, He was extremely powerful. After the bronze statue was pushed away, what was revealed was a spiral staircase that led underground. Elder Ge, I'll have to trouble you and Aurora to bring up the rear. Ling, let's go in. Yes, Your Highness. Elder Ge and Aurora nodded in agreement. Then Gaoji and Ling stepped into the spiral staircase. Aurora and Elder Ge seemed to have a tacit understanding. Aurora quietly retreated into the darkness to investigate the surrounding situation, while Elder Ge gently placed the bronze statue back to its original position. Then, Elder Ge also disappeared into the darkness as if no one had ever been here. Chapter 849. Outside of the capital of Blazing Flames, Wuming carried Vera out of the portal and flew in a random direction. One had to know that most of the land in the North District was barren land, and so was the outer sect of the 54545 division. Therefore, there was no need to deliberately find a barren land to fight Maxwell, because places that were not cities were basically barren. My bride. Let go of my bride. The voice was heard before the person could be seen. There were some ripples in the space. In the midst of the distortion, Maxwell appeared at the place where Wu Ming had appeared before. Looking at Wu Ming's departing figure, Maxwell's figure flashed, and along with the distortion of space, Maxwell disappeared again. On Wu Ming's side, seeing that it was about time, he stopped. This place was far enough from the capital of Blazing Flames, and the surrounding land was barren. After landing on the ground, Wu Ming let go of Vera, who was blushing in his arms. Vera, can you leave for a while? Wu Ming said gently to Vera. Vera tilted her head in confusion at first, then nodded silently. She turned around and waved her hand, opening a door, the realm door. Villo, be careful. After showing concern for Wu Ming, Vera jumped into the realm door with a blushing face and left this place. This period of time together has been an unexpected gain. Wu Ming smiled and shrugged. Yes, that's right. Wu Ming was referring to pure friendship. However, without waiting for Wu Ming to think more, the space not far from Wu Ming distorted, and Maxwell appeared in front of Wu Ming. Maxwell, who appeared in front of Wu Ming, did not attack, but looked around for Vera's figure. In the end, Maxwell looked at Wu Ming with an extremely gloomy expression. Where's my bride? Wu Ming smiled slightly. Of course, she was sent to my bridal chamber. This sentence was like a fuse, causing Maxwell's eyes to suddenly bulge out, and his mental state became even more abnormal. Aha! At this moment, it was as if the pain that Maxwell had suffered from Wu Ming's attack had manifested. Maxwell howled at the top of his lungs. Kill you! 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 The ice and fire instantly arrived in front of Wu Ming. They were like hunting dogs, frantically biting at Wu Ming. However, haven't you learned your lesson? Maxwell, didn't I tell you? Wu Ming raised a hand as he spoke. In an instant, a large amount of mana surged and burst out from Wu Ming's palm, blasting the man-eating hound into pieces. This kind of attack is completely useless? In the face of Maxwell's attack, Wu Ming only needed to compress his own mana and release it to break it. Yes, it was a simple release of magic power. I have to say, as a 4-digit demon king, you're really degrading yourself. Other than the fact that his immortality was more than 4 digits, Wu Ming really could not see how Maxwell qualified as a 4-digit demon king. However, Maxwell also realized that Wu Ming was looking down on him. Therefore, he, who was basically blinded by anger, was ready to use his trump card. Maxwell waved his hand, and there was another distortion in space. Individuals appeared one after another around Wu Ming, appearing one after another, like the twinkling stars in the sky. Those were the clones of Absolute Evil, a pure white 2-headed dragon army. And there were a lot of them. The surrounding desolate land was filled with white figures, and it seemed that they were no less than the Absolute Evil clones that attacked the Eastern District. In fact, they were even more numerous. Sure enough, these Absolute Evil clones are your doing. Thinking of the 2-headed dragons that attacked No Name, Wu Ming was slightly angry. If Wu Ming was not there, perhaps the entire No Name would have suffered. As a member of No Name, Wu Ming would not allow it. But let me tell you, These things are all defeated by me. Even if the number was much more than last time, Wuming was confident that he would not be killed or injured by these things. However, what he needed to worry about was that he could not let an absolute evil clone run into the city of raging flames. Wuming could not imagine the consequences of an irrational existence with the power of a deity entering the city. At such a close distance, you won't have a chance. Without waiting for Maxwell to finish speaking, the absolute evil clones rushed towards Wuming as if they had received an order. Indeed, as Maxwell said, the distance was too close, and Wuming did not have time to chant. However, Wuming's 12 clones could be instantaneously cast. But my ability is not limited to authority. In an instant, the absolute evil clones buried Wuming, forming a small mountain of absolute evil clones. However, immediately after that, several rays of light came out from the absolute evil clones. Ukdugod, great God's mark. As the voice fell, an explosion occurred from the absolute evil clones. Countless absolute evils were blown to ashes, and not a single drop of blood was left behind. What? The explosion was so inexplicable that Maxwell did not understand what was going on. He saw with his own eyes that Wuming, who did nothing, was covered by the absolute evil clones. Do you know the Lune Rune? Wuming, who walked out from the center of the explosion unscathed, stretched out his finger and drew in the air as he spoke to Maxwell. The great god Odin sacrificed an eye in exchange for supreme wisdom. It's not that simple. Wuming casually tossed the rune that he had drawn, and a few more absolute evil clones that charged forward were instantly burned to ashes and disappeared with the wind. In order to prevent the blood of the absolute evil clones from producing new absolute evil clones, Wuming had been using the Lune Rune that could completely destroy the absolute evil clones. Maxwell, who understood what the Lune Rune was, could not help but frown. He was so angry that he was about to lose his mind, but he did not completely lose his mind. He still understood what was futile. Not only that, but Wuming also had the powerful power of chanting, and the Manchala square that stored many divine persona equipment. No matter how many absolute evil clones there were, they would not be able to do anything to him in a short time. Moreover, Vera might have already escaped. This guy is just trying to piss me off. At that moment, Maxwell had such a thought. To put it bluntly, Maxwell wanted to escape. Wuming naturally would not let Maxwell escape. I still say the same thing. As a 4-digit demon king, you are too cheap. You are not worthy of Vera at all. One of Wuming's taunts made Maxwell angry again. Aha! Shut up. Vera is mine. Mine. Wuming could not help but laugh. As expected, Maxwell would lose his mind when it came to Vera. Wuming's previous taunts were all to make Maxwell gradually lose his mind and lower his IQ. After all, an opponent without reason would not escape. Moreover, an opponent without reason would not hold back their strength, and would reveal their hidden killer moves. For example, standing in the middle of the absolute evil clones army, and being able to command the absolute evil clones. Wuming had more or less understood Maxwell's situation. Next, it was time to use the real deal. If Maxwell reacted and allowed any of the absolute evil clones to escape to the capital of Raging Flames, it would be a big problem. Moreover, with so many absolute evil clones, they should be all of Maxwell's assets. It was just nice to get rid of them all in one go. At that moment, Wuming snapped his fingers. Pa! Chapter 850. Hum. Along with the almost inaudible vibrations, the entire space seemed to have changed. Maxwell felt a chill run down his spine, as if he had encountered an unprecedented crisis. What did you do? Unlike the previous angry roars, this time Maxwell questioned Wuming with a slightly frightened tone. Of course I'm playing the game of blessings. Wuming lowered his raised hand, and answered in a rather pleased tone. Immediately after, Wuming's devilish smile was reflected in Maxwell's eyes, causing the temperature on Maxwell's back to drop by quite a bit. Do you have the authority of the organizer? It was understandable that Maxwell was shocked. Not everyone could obtain the authority of the organizer, not to mention Wuming, who had just joined the box court not long ago. Although Maxwell was a 4-digit demon king, He didn't have the authority of the organizer. There was no other reason. Although Maxwell had been in the box court longer than Wuming, he and Wuming were both considered newbies. However, this once again proved how cheap Maxwell, the 4-digit Demon King, was. Wuming was different from Maxwell. As the root dragon, the box court naturally wouldn't be stingy with granting Wuming the authority of the organizer. This was an intangible benefit. It seems like you don't know that I have the authority of the organizer. But soon after, Wuming felt relieved. Ever since he used the authority of the organizer on Wuming, he didn't use it again. After all, Wuming didn't need the authority of the organizer. Over time, the authority of the organizer was basically forgotten by Wuming. While Wuming was still thinking about how to deal with Maxwell, he slowly thought of using the authority of the organizer to deal with Maxwell. In the box court world, the box court system was absolute. Even the humans in the final trial had to abide by the rules of the box court. If he had to find someone who wasn't restricted by the box court, it would definitely be Wuming. Of course, he had to be in his true body. Thank you for sending me these bodies of absolute evil. Judging from the number, this should be all of them. Not only will I be able to eliminate them all in one go, but I can also bury them with you. This is killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Smack! Wuming raised his hand and snapped his fingers again. A white contract document floated down from the sky and landed in front of Maxwell. Maxwell subconsciously caught it and began to read it. Gift game name. Challenge game contestant. Maxwell contestants winning condition. Defeat the organizer at the designated venue. Host's victory condition. The contestant cannot defeat the host within the specified time limit. Participant penalty for failure. Death oath. Respecting the above content, based on the glory, flag, and authority of the organizer, this game of blessings will be held. Seal of Originate God. This was an extremely simple bestowment competition. All one needed to do was defeat the organizer. It was as simple and crude as those demon kings who abused the organizer's authority to attack ordinary citizens. But today, the victim was a demon king with a 4-digit number. RIP! Angrily tearing the contract to shreds, Maxwell went completely mad. Ah! Hearing this heart-wrenching cry, people who didn't know would think that Maxwell had suffered a great grievance. What is it? Lord Demon King, you don't even have the courage to participate in the bestowment competition? As long as you defeat me, you can win. Wuming continued to mock Maxwell in a mocking tone, even though he was forced to participate in the gift match. However, defeating Wuming was extremely difficult. The Manchala phalanx that contained thousands of divine weapons, the divine blade of salvation, the evolved divine power obtained from killing a god, the rune script that the god Odin sacrificed one of his eyes, the martial arts that originated from the Shadow Queen Skaha, the game system magic that came from an unknown world, and the spiritual base that reached the peak of the servant. In terms of weapons, Maxwell was not as good as Wuming. In terms of magic, Maxwell was not as good as Wuming. In terms of close combat, Maxwell was not as good as Wuming. In terms of home field advantage, Maxwell was not as good as Wuming. Maxwell's bestowment could not cause any damage to Wuming. The only cheat like immortality and miraculous space jump also lost its effect after Maxwell was pulled into the game of blessings by Wuming. Although Maxwell didn't have a comprehensive understanding of Silent Wonder, he knew one thing. In a head-on battle, he absolutely couldn't win against Silent Wonder. In short, Maxwell could only die now. You want me to die? It's not that easy. Maxwell suddenly raised his head. His eyes were slightly protruding and bloodshot. Maxwell waved his hand, and the army of absolute evil avatars ran toward the direction of Blazing Flame City. You're right. Someone needs to be buried with me. People who were close to death tended to become more clear-headed. It seemed that Maxwell was like that. He actually thought of letting the army of absolute evil avatars attack Blazing Flame City. If so many absolute evil avatars attacked Blazing Flame City, Wuming was sure that Blazing Flame City would be destroyed. This was what Wuming was worried about before. But, do you think I didn't think of this, Maxwell? Wuming crossed his arms and smiled. Other than that, he did nothing else. When the absolute evil avatars rushed to a certain place, It was as if there was an invisible wall blocking their way. The absolute evil avatars collectively stopped. Bam 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 bam. However, there were still many two-headed dragons who crashed into the wall and let out miserable shrieks. Roar roar roar. Along with the collision of the two-headed dragons, the entire space changed. Like raindrops falling into the water. The entire space of the barren land where Wuming, Maxwell, and the two-headed dragon army were changed completely amidst the ripples. This wasn't the barren land outside Blazing Flame City. This was clearly an endless ice field filled with icicles. The invisible wall that blocked the absolute evil avatars was a layer of ice that was more than 10 meters thick. Phew. A gust of cold wind blew and Maxwell couldn't help but shrink his body. Now he understood why he felt a chill down his spine. It wasn't because he was overly afraid. Instead, it was because the environment around him had been changed. The contract clearly states that you have to defeat the organizer at the stipulated venue. You've already arrived at the so-called stipulated venue, Wuming said, and a contract appeared before him. The previous contract had been torn apart by Maxwell, but that didn't affect the contents of the contract at all. Then, Wuming tossed the contract aside, and picked up the staff of Anziergen that had appeared beside him out of nowhere. Everything just now was an illusion created by the Lune Rune. You've already arrived at this tomb long before I issued the contract. This was the fixed enchantment of the staff of Anziergen, the fifth layer of ice field in Nazalic. The staff of Anziergen was retrieved by Wuming from his Dragoness space after the Lune Rune's illusion was activated. The Lune Rune was inscribed on the ground by Wuming's mental strength, which was why Maxwell didn't see it. All right, Maxwell. Are you ready to meet your death? Chapter 851. Salamandra's headquarters, the fifth palace of the 12 palaces, the underground passage that Galji and Ling entered. The staircase leading underground extended in a spiral pattern. Because of the surrounding darkness, Galji took out the illumination gift from his gift card and walked up the stairs with Ling. After walking for a long time, the two still didn't see the bottom. We're not there yet, Your Highness. Ling held her gift card that was starting to heat up and said worriedly. Can't hold on any longer? Galji stopped and turned to look at the gift card in Ling's hand. Ling's gift card was no longer the same color as before. The entire card was red and there was a faint trace of heat. If you can't hold on any longer, then use my gift card to replace it. Although Galji's gift card contained other people's items, if he really couldn't hold on any longer, he had to use it when necessary. After all, he couldn't let that come out here. Regardless of the losses, if that really came out, he and Ling would be in great danger. It's okay, Your Highness. My gift card can still hold on for a while. Let's go quickly. Ling wiped the sweat from her forehead and smiled to show that she was fine. At that moment, Galji didn't say anything more. Right now they had to reach the bottom quickly. After walking for a while, Galji and Ling finally saw the bottom. It was an underground space. On one of the walls in the underground space, the words "Between the Stars" were engraved. Not only that, but there were also 5 sealed doors and a piece of parchment on the wall engraved with the words. As mentioned before, even humans in the final trial had to follow the rules of the box court. After Absolute Evil was sealed, it naturally left behind a contract document. Of course, this parchment was the contract document that sealed Absolute Evil. And these 5 doors were probably the entrance to unlock Absolute Evil's seal. However, the correct entrance could only be one of them. However, Galji and Ling had no intention of solving this gift game at all. They even stood motionless in the same place. If we had the item to unlock the seal, I'm afraid we would have to unravel the mystery of this game to unlock the seal. Galji couldn't help but sigh. However, with Belle around, the mystery of the game of blessings will naturally be solved easily. Belle, who was standing behind Galji, smiled proudly. It seemed that the young girl had unparalleled confidence in her wisdom. But shortly after, her expression changed. Your Highness, my gift card can't hold on much longer. Ling's expression changed as she said to Galji with a sad face. Galji looked at Belle's gift card. The gift card, which was originally red from the heat, had now turned black. It was an ominous shade of black. Ling, place your gift card in front of the 5 doors. Be quick, Galji ordered. Belle's gift card and the others' gift cards were all broken, so it wasn't wise to release that one here. Now he could only throw caution to the wind and place Belle's gift card together with the thing inside it. When the thing corrodes Belle's gift card, it will automatically come out. Quick, Ling, put it down and we'll leave as soon as possible. If they stayed any longer, they would probably be buried with the seal of absolute evil. Yes. Yes. Ling immediately used her gift of distance control, and the gift card in her hand appeared in front of the 5 doors. Let's go. After Galji finished speaking, Ling immediately came to Galji's side and grabbed his arm. Ling's gift was activated again, and the two instantly disappeared on the spot, and returned to the first step of the spiral staircase. The reason why they didn't use the gift card to go to the bottom was that Ling didn't know how deep the spiral staircase was and couldn't accurately control the distance. Now that they had walked through it once, Ling had an idea of the distance from the bottom to the top. Hence, Ling brought Galji to the first step. Dong dong. Galji immediately knocked on the bronze statue blocking the entrance. This was his and Elder Ji's secret signal. A few seconds later, the bronze statue was moved away and Galji and Ling immediately came out. After Galji and Belle came out, Galao immediately put the bronze statue back in place. Your Highness, how is it? Aurora, who came with Elder Gu, immediately asked. It's ready. Let's leave quickly. Galji said without hesitation. Elder Gu and Aurora nodded. Then the 4 of them immediately followed the original path and left Salamandra. At the gate of Salamandra, the member of Salamandra who went to report had already returned to his post. They actually said to let them do whatever they want. Even if we are allies with no name, they can't just do whatever they want. Although he complained like this, he knew that even though Wu Ming's community was a nameless no name, he wasn't some insignificant character. Whether they were afraid of the other party, or they were allies, in short, Mandela's order was to wait and see. Anyway, this guard was not the leader of Salamandra, so he didn't have to worry about it. He just had to listen to the orders from above and watch his own gate. But right after that, he heard soft footsteps coming from behind him. He immediately turned around, but what greeted him was a fist that was not the size of a normal person. Who, before he could shout, he was immediately knocked out by the fist. The one who knocked him out was naturally Elder Gu in his human form. It's time to go, Elder Gu. Galji said behind Elder Ji's back. There was no telling when that would come out, so it was better to leave quickly. Elder Gu naturally understood this point, so he didn't kill him. He only knocked out the member of Salamandra who was guarding the door. The soft footsteps were caused by them walking too quickly. But since they were already at the gate, there was no need to hide it. Your Highness, do we still need to wait for Maxwell? Aurora suddenly asked. In my opinion, that guy probably ran away a long time ago. How could he beat that bastard? Ling pouted. They naturally knew that Maxwell went to find Wu Ming. With Maxwell leading Wu Ming, they were happy to see this, so they let Maxwell do whatever he wanted. And Ling and the others, who had seen how powerful Wu Ming was, naturally knew that Maxwell could not beat Wu Ming. That was why Ling said that Maxwell ran away a long time ago. As for being killed or captured by Wu Ming, it was not realistic. After all, Maxwell's immortality and escapability were top-notch. That's true, Your Highness. We should hurry and retreat. Elder Go also advised. At that moment, Galji nodded and the 4 of them prepared to leave. But, I really didn't expect you to have such high expectations for Maxwell. Chapter 852. Wu Ming's voice came from the shadows of the street in front of them, which made the 4 of them immediately alert. Then Wu Ming's figure walked out of the shadows of the night, and Wu Ming appeared in front of the 4 of them. You still found us in the end. Galji closed his eyes slightly. Wu Ming being able to defeat Maxwell and find them in time was also within Galji's expectations, but the probability was very small. It's all thanks to Maxwell. Wu Ming smiled. If it weren't for Maxwell, he really wouldn't have known that Galji and the others would sneak into Salamandra tonight. However, Galji didn't understand Wu Ming's words. Although they weren't in the same group, Maxwell shouldn't have deliberately exposed their location. After all, this was related to the plan of the higher-ups. However, there was another possibility. For example, Maxwell had been captured by Wuming. Where's Maxwell? Galji asked Wuming. Wuming answered Galji straightforwardly. I caught him. Wuming's eyes weren't perfunctory at all, as if he was telling the truth. Seeing that Wuming didn't seem to be lying, Belle, Golao, and Aurora were shocked. They knew best how difficult it was to deal with Maxwell. He was born between life and death, and the strongest demon in the North District had been entangled by Maxwell for 100 years. However, Wuming, who had only met Maxwell a few times, had actually captured him. How could they not be shocked? However, this gave them a signal. Wuming's strength was probably beyond their imagination. At that moment, the three of them immediately became vigilant. Gulao's black cloak bulged slightly, as if he was about to remove his human form and turn back into a griffin. A bulge also appeared under Aurora's black cloak, which looked like a weapon. Belle grabbed Galji's hand, ready to use the gift of distance control to take him away if something went wrong. On the other hand, Galji didn't panic at all. He didn't look like someone who had been forced into a corner by Wuming. Anyway, we're not in cahoots with him. You've helped me by capturing him. I have no intention of helping you. Wuming then looked at Galji. Instead, it's you guys who sneaked into Salamandra. What are you up to? I should have told you to stop messing around with the people around me, right? The people around Wuming didn't just refer to no name. It could be understood that the people around Wuming were also included in the category of people around him. To put it simply, Wuming didn't want to see Galji again, at least not in this way. Galji didn't say anything and just watched Wuming quietly. However, Belle, Elder Gu, and Aurora, who had a tacit understanding with Galji, were ready to attack. Wuming didn't want to waste any more time with Galji's group and took the lead. Wuming didn't move at all. Instead, he relied on his mental strength to transport a large amount of Lune runes from the ground to Galji's group. There's something below. Aurora, who was a mage, was the first to discover the Lune runes underground. She yelled and immediately flew up with magic. At this moment, the explosive Lune runes underground were activated. Boom! Smoke and dust filled the entrance of Salamandra, concealing Galji's group of 4. However, this didn't affect Wuming, who possessed mental strength at all. He easily saw Elder Gu, who had transformed into a griffin, charging toward him. Suddenly, rows of translucent squares appeared behind Wuming. Mjolnir, Mjolnir. Wuming yelled and a short-handled hammer emerged from one of the squares. Wuming grasped it in his hand. Then Wuming swung the short hammer heavily at Glea, who had transformed into a griffin and was charging over. In an instant, lightning erupted from the hammer like a wave, and countless thunderbolts engulfed Glea and drowned him. Glea hurriedly retreated from the range of the thunderbolts. However, his body was full of scorch marks and traces of thunderbolts that hadn't dissipated. Ugh! This caused Glea to whimper in pain, because the lightning was still taking effect in Glea's body. Clang, clang. Along with the sound of a harp, the thunderbolts in Glea's body gradually disappeared. Wuming turned to the source of the sound. It turned out that it was the harp that Aurora had retrieved from under the black cloak and played. Needless to say, the harp must be a special gift to be able to eliminate the thunderbolts of Thor's hammer. Mjolnir, also known as Thor's hammer, was a weapon used by Thor, the thunder god of Northern European mythology. It was said to be made of rare metals from Northern Europe, and the wood of the world tree. It could be said to be the strongest weapon in Northern European mythology. The fact that Glea could withstand the thunderbolts of Thor's hammer was enough to prove that he wasn't weak. So can you still withstand the next attack? Wuming yelled and threw Mjolnir back into the square behind him. Shortly after, one of the squares in the Manchala square behind Wuming moved again. A spear, or rather a throwing spear, fell into Wuming's palm. Gungnir. Wuming aimed the spear at Glea and threw it. What's that name? Galji instantly guessed what the spear that Wuming threw was. That's right, the legendary weapon held by the Norse god Odin. It was also known as the Gungnir of the god's declaration. However, what was important wasn't who held it, but the ability of Gungnir. Gungnir didn't have any fancy attributes. It only had one characteristic, which was that it would never miss. It was extremely simple and powerful. Old Glea. Bell yelled at Glea hurriedly. I got it, Glea said, flapping his griffin wings, and hurriedly flying in another direction. However, Glea also knew that Odin's Gungnir was a divine spear that would never miss. It was impossible to dodge, and would definitely hit the enemy's weapon. Therefore, no matter how Glea dodged, it would be useless unless he was hit or blocked. However, they didn't have any defensive gifts. Wuming had also extorted the Leo's sovereignty of the sun from Galgi. But Glea, who knew this, still chose to dodge. Gungnir, who had been thrown out by Wu Ming, followed closely behind Glea, and its speed became faster and faster. In the end, Glea actually saw the opportunity and turned sideways, allowing Gungnir to pierce through his thigh. Got to say, this was indeed a way to deal with the Gungnir. Glea's thigh was only pierced, and his wings and forelimbs were fine, so it didn't affect his battle capabilities much. The Gungnir that hit Glea automatically flew back to Wu Ming's hand. Wu Ming tossed it casually into the Manchala square. I don't want to continue playing with you guys. Since the other party didn't reveal any more trump cards, there was no need to do so. Chapter 853. As Wu Ming spoke, a large number of grids appeared in the Manchala formation behind him. Countless weapons automatically appeared and aimed at Galgi and the others. With that, countless high-grade armaments shot towards Galgi, Bell, and Aurora like bullets from a machine gun. Bell. Aurora, who was flying in the air, shouted. She played her harp and opened an extremely weak barrier a few meters in front of her. Her purpose was naturally to cover Bell and take Galgi away. As long as Galgi and Bell left, she, who was flying in the sky, would be able to escape easily. As for Galgi, he had already flown far away, so everyone would be able to escape successfully. I got it. Bell nodded fiercely and immediately activated her ability. However, she and Galgi remained where they were. What's going on? Bell was rather flustered and at a loss. On the other hand, Galgi saw that the surrounding exploded ground was filled with Lune runes again. He didn't know if it came with the explosion runes or if it was sent by Wu Ming when he and Wu Ming were fighting just now. Anyway, it was these runes that limited Bell's range of control. Galgi used all his strength to kick the ground. A large number of Lune runes lost their light. It seemed that they had been destroyed and lost their effectiveness. However, countless Lune runes appeared immediately after, like an endless supply of leaks. What? It seemed that Wu Ming had set up a large number of these Lune runes to trap them. As expected, someone who was able to capture Maxwell after just a few meetings. How could he not have prepared a method to counter Bell's gift? However, there was no time for Bell and Galgi to panic and think because Aurora's defensive barrier was extremely weak and was instantly broken by countless God Park weapons. This was Wu Ming's strength. They had finally witnessed it today. For a moment, the few of them who couldn't leave and had no defensive means were at their wits' end. Even so, Bell and Aurora instantly appeared in front of Galgi and protected him behind them. Galgi was shocked. A friend in need was a friend indeed. Under such circumstances, the fact that the two of them could still protect Galgi without any hesitation meant that their relationship with Galgi was no longer as simple as a master-servant relationship. Only close companions could describe the two of them as such. However, it wasn't just Bell and Aurora. Glea was the same. Glea, who had flown far away because of Gungnir's pursuit, suddenly rushed back at an extremely fast speed. Roar! Along with the dragon's roar, Glea's griffin body shone brightly. His entire body began to expand and transform. In the end, Glea turned into a giant dragon and stood in front of Galgi and the others, taking on Wu Ming's weapon barrage. Elder Gu. As a young girl, Bell looked at Glea, who had blocked the damage for them with heartache. Glea was the one who had blocked the Lune rune explosion for them. Then, Bell calmed down and looked at Galgi. Your Highness, what should we do now? Glea used his life to create an opportunity for them, so Galgi had to give instructions on what to do. No matter if it was to attack or retreat, Galgi had to make the decision. They were blocked by Wu Ming as soon as they stepped out of Salamandra. Bell's gift wasn't effective at the moment. Aurora wasn't of much use, and they couldn't defeat Galji in a head-on battle. Glea was also enduring the pain of taking on the weapon barrage for the three of them. Given the current situation, it seemed like retreating to the base of Salamandra, for the time being, was the wisest choice. However, such a huge commotion at the entrance of Salamandra naturally attracted the attention of the insiders. As a mage, Aurora could clearly sense that there were already many people rushing over here. Besides, if they hid inside Salamandra, they would eventually be discovered, especially when Wuming was still here. Besides, they couldn't give up on Glea. Get ready, I'm going to forcibly release another cosmology. Galji's eyes suddenly became cold. The so-called another cosmology was another universe, and it was also a powerful force that Wuming didn't know about in the box garden world. It could be understood as a gift that could infinitely magnify one's own universe to interfere with the outside world. This explanation seemed similar to the inherent enchantment that materialized the mind of a magician, but at the end of the day, another cosmology was many times more powerful than the inherent enchantment. This was because the simulation of another cosmology was infinitely magnifying the cosmology one belonged to. This was not something that a mere magician's spiritual landscape could compare to. Moreover, the holder of another cosmology was basically the center of every group of gods, or rather, those who possessed another cosmology often had the ability to become the center of a group of gods. Therefore, it was not an exaggeration to say that another cosmology was one of the most powerful forces in the box garden world. But, Your Highness, Ling couldn't help but worry. As one of the strongest forces in the box garden, each another cosmology had its own restrictions and conditions. In order to use another cosmology, the restrictions had to be lifted or the conditions had to be met. And Galji's another cosmology required him to hold the sovereignty of the sun in order to activate it. If it was forcibly activated, failure was considered good, but serious injury or even death was very likely. However, their only two sovereignty of the sun, Leo's and Ophiuchus's, had been threatened by Wuming. In the current situation, it was extremely difficult for Galji to activate another cosmology. However, looking at Glea, who was unconscious and was only instinctively protecting them, Galji couldn't help but clench his fists. Since they had been forced to this extent, Galji would feel bad if he didn't teach Wuming a lesson. His another cosmology was a powerful trump card that could even kill the Demon King in one blow. Even Maxwell, who had an extremely powerful immortality, was no exception. Wuming was just a mere spirit. No matter how strong he was, it was impossible for him to withstand the damage caused by the another cosmology if he was caught off guard. If he was successfully launched and hit, he would die without a doubt. It could be regarded as relieving his worries. Anyway, that had been placed at the entrance of the seal of absolute evil. As long as the time was up, that would erode the seal of absolute evil, and absolute evil would break out of the seal. First, they had to get through the difficulties in front of them. Then they could fish in troubled waters and escape from here. As for using the Pandora's box that Maxwell carried to retrieve that, what a joke. Galji and the others were preparing to take advantage of the chaos after unlocking the seal of absolute evil to eliminate Maxwell, who was sent to monitor them, and escape from the control of the higher-ups. Therefore, at present, as long as they released another cosmology, eliminated Wuming in one fell swoop, found Maxwell who was captured by Wuming, and eliminated him, they would be completely free. Do you dare to bet? Galji suddenly asked. Your Highness, no matter what, I will be by your side. Ling looked at Galji with an extremely determined gaze. Me too, Your Highness. Aurora echoed. Galji smiled. Then Galji immediately gave orders. Aurora, when I say start later, move Galao away. Ling, please help me block the Godhead equipment that might break through the moment Galao is moved away. Yes, Your Highness. Ling and Aurora responded in unison. Victory or defeat depended on this. Chapter 854. Wuming, who was continuously attacking Galji and the others through the Manchala Phalanx's weapon salvo, intentionally lowered the level of the weapon he released when he saw Glea blocking in front of Galji and the others. After all, Wuming didn't want to kill anyone in the first place. The weapon salvo he fired at Galji and the others was just for show. At most, it would only injure them severely, but it was impossible to kill them. But who would have thought that Glea would suddenly rush in front of Galji and the others? However, even if he intentionally lowered the level of the weapon he released, it was not something Glea's body could withstand. Just as Wuming was about to stop the projection of the Manchala phalanx, Glea's entire dragon body seemed to be pulled by an external force and moved away. Then, a ray of light charged at Wuming. Wuming subconsciously threw defensive weapons from the Manchala phalanx, but the ray of light instantly passed through these defensive weapons and arrived in front of Wuming. Not only was Wuming surprised that the ray of light penetrated the defensive weapons, but he was also surprised by the power contained in the ray of light. It was a power he had never seen before. As if it was the power of a universe. I didn't expect Galji to have such a trump card. After Wuming finished speaking, his entire body was covered by the ray of light, and then he disappeared. Your Highness. We did it. Bell, who had blocked a few weapons for Galji, stood in front of Galji and looked excitedly at Wuming's disappearance behind the fallen shield. Is that so? Galji forced a smile, and knelt on the ground with a thud. He made the right bet. Although it didn't seem to be very powerful, the simulated cosmology was successfully released. However, the price of forcibly releasing the simulated cosmology was not small. Your Highness. Bell hurriedly supported Galji with a worried expression. Quick, Bell, you and Aurora go check on Oldga first. Galji knew that he wouldn't die for a while, but Glea looked like he was about to die. Glea had already reverted from his dragon form to his griffin form. His wings and back were badly mutilated, and the griffin had fallen into a coma. Don't worry, Your Highness. I've already given Glea a simple treatment. The most important thing now is to leave this place. Aurora used magic to carry Glea and landed beside Galji. Galji nodded and stood up with Bell's help. That's good. Let's leave quickly. And at this moment, where Wuming had disappeared, a sacred sword filled with a powerful and ancient aura appeared. If I remember correctly, this should be a weapon called the Divine Blade of Salvation, right? Ling pondered. Then she smiled. Looks like Your Highness killed the opponent and the gift automatically dropped. It seemed like an extremely unreliable way to kill monsters and steal treasures, but it was very possible in the box court world. After all, gifts were different from individuals. Some special gifts would automatically drop after the death of the original owner. It seemed like this was the case with the Divine Blade of Salvation. Your Highness, I'll go and get that sword. Ling entrusted Galji to Aurora and ran in the direction of the Divine Blade of Salvation. Wait, Ling. Galji subconsciously felt a trace of uneasiness and wanted Ling to come back. After all, there was another possibility for the gift to drop apart from killing someone. For example, the original owner of the gift was not dead. Looks like that universe-like power is your trump card, Galji. Wuming's voice entered Galji's ears. In an instant, a black and purple teleportation door appeared. Wuming walked out from it and appeared beside the Divine Blade of Salvation. He held the Divine Blade of Salvation in his hand. Ha! Ling couldn't help but stop and look at Wuming blankly. Wasn't he killed by His Highness's another cosmology? Ling. Come back. Galji snarled. Ling reacted instantly to Galji's roar, but the runes on the ground were still in effect. These runes weren't powerful Lune runes. Instead, they were runes that limited distances. They were often used around people who lived in seclusion to prevent outsiders from entering, and could only wander within a certain range. This was why Ling's gift of controlling distances was ineffective. If one moved within a set distance of a certain range, it might still be effective. But if one moved beyond this range, it was equivalent to being ineffective. This was why Ling's gift was as though ineffective. At that moment, Ling had no choice but to turn around and run toward Galji. But how could Wuming let her go? Along with the sound of chains, Ling felt a heavy blow to the back of her head. In an instant, she felt as though someone had struck her from behind with a stick, and she gradually lost consciousness. Then countless silver whitish chains like giant pythons bound Ling tightly. Even her nose and eyes were completely covered, making her look like a mummy. Then, Ling snapped her fingers and a purplish-black ripple appeared beneath her feet. She and the pseudo-heaven lock fell into it together. Ling. Galji took a step forward agitatedly, but due to his injuries he couldn't help but kneel on the ground. Fortunately, Aurora was there to support him. Don't worry, I'm not that cruel to kill her. I only captured her. Wuming approached Galji step by step with the blade of salvation in his hand. Don't come over. Aurora raised her courage and roared at Wuming with her harp. However, this didn't have any effect on Wuming's advance. How about another deal? Wuming ignored Aurora and turned to Galji. Tell me your purpose in entering Salamandra, and the sequence of events. Don't even think about it. Aurora wanted to attack again, but Galji grabbed her arm. Galji silently shook his head, indicating that Aurora shouldn't make any unnecessary resistance. Simply put, she should endure and not get hurt for no reason. At this time, the last Salamandra troops to arrive surrounded Galji, Wuming, and the others. Stop! Mandela shouted in high spirits. Then he was glared at by Wuming. However, Mandela had to endure. Take these people down. Mandela pointed at Galji and the others. Then, the members of Salamandra stepped forward and prepared to take Galji and the others into custody. At this time, there was a violent tremor inside Salamandra. Rumble. The earth shook. Chapter 855. Galji looked at the epicenter and found that it was the fifth palace. That direction. Not good. Mandela's expression suddenly changed as he looked in the same direction. Quick, inform everyone to evacuate the residents of Blazing Flame City. Get everyone to leave Blazing Flame City immediately. Move quickly. Mandela calmly gave the order. After that, the troops of Salamandra ignored Galji and Wuming and began to carry out Mandela's orders. After that, Mandela looked deeply at Wuming, Galji and the others, and then rushed into Salamandra. As you can see, the seal of absolute evil has been broken. Seeing that the outsiders had left, Galji spoke. Galji noticed that Wuming's expression had also changed, but Wuming's expression was neither fear nor shock, but joy and melancholy. I think I know how you broke the seal of absolute evil, Galji. This was because Wuming felt the aura of his main body. It seemed that his main body was in Salamandra, which was why Wuming was so happy. Only Wuming's main body, the root dragon, was immune to the rules of the box court, and could break the seal of absolute evil without the tools to break the seal. Let's change the deal. Tell me all the information about absolute evil. Since the seal had been broken, it was time to collect information to deal with absolute evil. Wuming snapped his fingers. Pa! Along the way, a white contract document appeared in Galji's hand. Organizer Authority. Seeing this contract document, Galji was shocked. He now knew why Wuming could capture Maxwell. It was because of the Organizer Authority. Then Wuming took out the staff of Ains Ergong and tapped it lightly on the ground. Galji, Aurora, and Glea disappeared on the spot. They were forcibly sent to their own space by Wuming. Then, Wuming chanted the words of the spirit. My contract, my kin, I am the place where the tributaries converge. Bind with me, heed my call, obey my command, appear. Then a figure appeared behind Wuming. It was Wuming's eighth incarnation, the kin. The Wuming that Galji had destroyed was actually one of Wuming's kin clones. Only the blade of salvation that the clone at that time was given by the main body. Then, Wuming handed the staff of Ains Ergong to the clone. The clone nodded and tapped the ground with the tip of the staff. The clone also disappeared. He went to the intrinsic barrier to make a deal with Galji and the others, or rather, to act as the host of the game of gifts. However, the gift competition that Wuming forced Galji and the others to participate in was different from the one that he forced Maxwell to participate in. This time, Wuming prepared the gift competition for Galji, and the others only to fish for information. Wuming even cautiously divided the three of them into different spaces. Although it was a temporary imprisonment, Wuming was not prepared to let Galji and the others go so easily this time. Firstly, the disaster they caused this time was quite serious. Secondly, Galji unlocked the seal of absolute evil. Not only did he release Wu Ming's main body, but he also released the remaining black mud that was attached to Wu Ming's main body. Back then, the black mud exploded deep into Wu Ming's body. In such a short time, it was impossible to clean up the black mud. Even if the inside of his body was cleaned up, it was inevitable that there would be black mud outside of his body. Perhaps they had used the corrosive power of the black mud to erode the seal of absolute evil. In the box, one had to abide by the rules of the box, but Wu Ming was an exception. However, Wu Ming would not take the initiative to break or challenge the rules of the box. Moreover, Wu Ming would never have thought that the other party would use the black mud left on his main body as the key to unlocking the seal of absolute evil. The black mud and Wu Ming were of the same origin. If Wu Ming was not affected by the box system, then the black mud was also not affected by the black mud. However, this was not a big deal. If absolute evil came into contact with the black mud, it would be very troublesome. This was the reason why Wu Ming was depressed. Without staying any longer, Wu Ming immediately took action and flew toward the place filled with the aura of his main body. Salamandra Fifth Palace, inside the sealed passage of absolute evil. Countless black mud rippled against the walls like ocean waves, causing the ground to tremble continuously. A 3-meter-tall black monster with 3 heads was crawling in the black mud, as if it was swimming in a comfortable ocean. Every time the monster swayed, black mud would flow out from under the monster's body and spread to the surroundings. Gradually, the entire sealed passage was submerged in black mud, but the monster did not feel any discomfort. It continued to swim in the Black Sea as if it did not want to care about anything on the ground. It was as if it just wanted to stay here. However, excessive black mud poured into the ground through the gaps of the bronze statue and began to cover everything on the ground. Anything that came into contact with the black mud, whether it was a person or an object, all burned up. The entire salamandra fell into a sea of fire. What is this? Help! However, before these people who were infected by the black mud could shout, the flames burned them to ashes. Get away from the black mud. Mandela, who was a step late, saw the situation and immediately began to order the people of Salamandra. Don't take anything with you. Everyone immediately evacuate from Salamandra and cover the evacuation of the residents of Flame Capital. Mandela once again ordered the internal members of Salamandra. At the rate the black mud was spreading, it would not be long before the entire Salamandra, or even the entire Flame Capital, would be corroded. At that moment, the members of Salamandra immediately acted as if they could not wait to leave this place immediately. Looking at Salamandra that was almost empty and had fallen into a sea of fire, Mandela could not help but sigh. There will be a day when Salamandra's headquarters will be covered in a sea of fire. After that, Mandela continued to walk inside. Sir Mandela? Mandela's confidants were puzzled by Mandela's behavior. If he continued to go deeper, he was afraid that he would not be able to come out later. The leader is still inside. I will go find her, Mandela said without turning his head. We will go together, Sir Mandela. Yes, Sir Mandela. Let's go together. Mandela's confidants immediately followed Mandela's footsteps. However, Mandela was furious. What are you doing? Can't you see that everyone who is touched by the black mud is burning? Retreat. Even the members of Salamandra who had the bloodline of the fire dragon could not hold on for more than a second. This showed how powerful the black mud was. However, one of Mandela's confidants immediately answered. But Sir Mandela, we cannot abandon you, nor can we abandon Lady Shadora. The others did not speak, but their eyes were extremely serious. They looked like they would not leave no matter what Mandela said. It could only be said that they were indeed members of Salamandra, who had the bloodline of the fire dragon. Their stubbornness was exactly the same as Mandela, who also had the bloodline of the fire dragon. At this moment, Wu Ming flew in. Leave Shadora to me. Hurry up and evacuate the residents of Flame Capital. Don't let the black mud touch them. Otherwise it will be over. As Wu Ming spoke, he flew in from the back. He did not stop all the way and flew directly into the interior. Obviously, he did not give Mandela and the others a chance to choose. Then I will leave Shadora to you. Mandela was also a reasonable person. Since Wu Ming wanted to go in, He would be a burden if he followed him in. Everyone, follow me to evacuate the residents of Flame Capital. With that, Mandela left with his confidants. Wu Ming, on the other hand, went deep inside Salamandra. Looking at the black mud that kept spreading in front of him, what Wu Ming was worried about still happened. Chapter 856. If the black root mud was taken out on its own, it wouldn't cause much damage. It only had a special effect on Wu Ming. At most, it could destroy the seal of absolute evil like Galji and the others. That was because the black root mud was attached to Wu Ming's body. If it was removed from Wu Ming's body, even if it was placed on the seal of absolute evil, it wouldn't cause any damage to the seal of absolute evil. The black root mud was neither good nor evil. It only targeted Wu Ming. However, if it was held by someone with evil intentions, it would completely become evil. Just like when Darius held the black root mud became an evil thing. It could erode servants, but other than that, it didn't have much effect on the ground, flowers, and trees. If Gidia held the black root mud, it would become a good thing because he only wanted to use the black root mud to achieve his own goals. Although it was evil in the eyes of humans, the black root mud was only used to deal with Wu Ming. There were no other changes. The black root mud was even simpler. It was neither good nor evil. It simply gave the black root mud to the Star Cup's consciousness. It didn't have much use at all, and it was easily destroyed by Wu Ming. Looking at the current situation, it was very likely that absolute evil had touched the black root mud, and used the black root mud as its power to fuse with it. The amount of black root mud continued to increase, and it caught fire when it came into contact with people. It was likely that absolute evil's ability extended after fusing with the black root mud. If it's absolute evil that fused with the black root mud, I'm afraid it will come to me next, Wu Ming said to himself. Although he was talking to himself, it was reasonable. The black root mud and Wu Ming were natural enemies. After being held by others, the other party would have a strong hostility toward Wu Ming. Wu Ming had experienced this many times. Darius, the consciousness of the Star Cup, and Gidia were both good, evil, and neutral, but they all had one thing in common, which was that they were inexplicably hostile toward Wu Ming. As such, absolute evil, who had absorbed the black origin soil, was probably also hostile toward Wu Ming. However, even if he was attacked by absolute evil, Wu Ming wouldn't run away from it. In terms of emotions, absolute evil was an existence that could endanger Quan Ting. Since Wu Ming had encountered it, he would deal with it. Logically speaking, absolute evil had the black origin soil on him, and his main body was probably with absolute evil. Even if absolute evil didn't find trouble with Wu Ming would find trouble with absolute evil. Let's find Shadora first. Wu Ming activated his psychic power to search for Shadora. It could only be said that Wu Ming was very lucky to find Shadora's location in an instant. At this moment, Wu Ming sensed that Shadora was carrying a little girl from Salamandra. They were flying in a room filled with black mud and fire. The entire room was burning and couldn't come out. Shadora! Wu Ming shouted as he flew in Shadora's direction. Lord Villo! Shadora was overjoyed when she heard Wu Ming's voice, as if she had escaped. However, she immediately shouted at Wu Ming, Lord Wu Ming, be careful. Lord Varen, be careful of these flames. The flames produced by the black mud have the same properties as the black mud. Shadora knew that not long ago, one of her companions rushed into the flames to save someone because he had the fire dragon bloodline. In the end, not only did he not save the person, but he also died. Not even a trace of him was left. However, Wu Ming wasn't afraid of this. Or rather, only Wu Ming wasn't afraid of this. Whoosh! Wu Ming rushed into the sea of fire that surrounded Shadora and flew to her side. Lord Villo, are you alright? Shadora was startled. The black origin soil was indeed Wu Ming's natural enemy, but at the same time, Wu Ming was also the natural enemy of the black origin soil. Although the black origin soil countered Wu Ming and could deal a lot of damage to Wu Ming, it was the same. When the black origin soil was used by an outsider, Wu Ming was the only one who wasn't restricted. In other words, Wu Ming who could produce origin power had a resistance to the black origin soil. Don't worry about that for now. Leave with this child first, Wuming said and opened a portal. Lord Villo, please leave with us. This is the last child left in Salamandra. It was because of Shadora's continuous rescue that she couldn't escape in time. However, it was also thanks to Shadora that apart from Shadora and the little girl in her arms, there were no other living members in Salamandra. No, I still have to deal with the enemy this time. You guys leave first. Wuming clearly sensed a hostile aura approaching quickly from underground. However, in Shadora's opinion, Wuming chose to stay behind alone in order to cover the retreat of the people from the capital of glowing flames. Lord Villo, the seal of absolute evil under Salamandra should have been broken. However, after analyzing the previous records, the Black Origin soil doesn't seem to be absolute evil's ability at all. Please be careful. Shadora kindly provided Wuming with information. I understand. You guys should leave first. Wuming pointed at the portal again and signaled Shadora to leave quickly. Of course, he knew what was going on. After all, they were of the same origin. Yes, okay. Lord Villo, I wish you victory, Shadora said and jumped into the portal. After confirming that Shadora and the little girl in her arms reached a safe location, Wuming closed the portal. Then, it's time to get down to business. Wuming said and raised the divine blade of salvation in his hand high up. Then Wuming stopped moving. Then, a Lune rune appeared in front of Wuming out of thin air. He touched the Lune with his spirit power, and a piece of information was transmitted into Wuming's mind. Information about absolute evil. However, before Wuming could think about it, the black mire below suddenly exploded. Wuming subconsciously slashed at the black mire below him. In an instant, the lightning of salvation that had been brewing on the divine blade of salvation suddenly exploded and hit a three-headed monster that had just jumped out of the ground. Roar! The monster let out an angry roar. It seemed that it was hurt by Wuming's attack. It really merged. The monster seemed to have been corroded by the black mire and lost its mind. Although the monster was covered in black mire, Wuming could vaguely see that its head was that of a dragon's. The information just now told Wuming about absolute evil, including what its true form was. The true form of absolute evil was not a special existence. It was just an evil god that stood at the peak of evil in the fire worship sect. Three-headed demon dragon, Azidakaha. Wuming slowly said the monster's name. The monster, or Azidakaha, responded to Wuming, but with an attack. Roar! The three-headed demon dragon roared and countless black mire gushed towards Wuming like pillars of magma. Boom! The house that Wuming was in, Salamandra, exploded. Wuming flew into the sky through the hole and looked down at Azidakaha with the divine blade of salvation raised high. Divine blade of salvation, release your brilliance. Chapter 857. Along with Wuming's words, the tip of the blade of salvation began to gather flames, and the flames slowly grew bigger. In the end, it turned into a sun, instantly illuminating the capital of glorious flames, and even the entire outer gate of the 54545 division. Although the entire burning fiery capital was also filled with flames at night, at this moment, the light of the flames could only serve as a foil to the sun, produced by the holy sword that could even split a star. The people who were retreating from Raging Flame Capital couldn't help but slow down their footsteps when they saw this scene. However, Mandela frowned. This would greatly slow down their retreat, which was quite disadvantageous. Everyone, Lord Villosilenseed, who defeated the Demon King who attacked during the Fire Dragon birth ceremony, is a good friend of Lord White Yiksha, and has strength no weaker than Lord White Yiksha, is fighting against the enemy who attacked us. We must seize the opportunity to retreat and not drag Lord Villo down. At that moment, Shadora, who appeared out of nowhere, shouted. When everyone heard this, it was as if they were awakened. They all sped up their retreat. After all, Wuming was covering for them. If they continued to stand there and watch, it would really be inexcusable. Although Shadora's voice could not reach the entire retreating team, many people who had begun to speed up their retreat would repeat Shadora's words when they saw someone slowing down. In this way, the news that the hero of no name was covering for their retreat spread wider and wider. More and more people sped up their retreat. In the end, before the black mud infected the entire fiery capital, everyone retreated. It could be said that Shadora's urging words had indirectly helped Wu Ming and No Name gain a wave of popularity. This made Mandela, who had finally found Shadora, feel rather helpless. Because this was completely using Salamandra as a stepping stone to help Wu Ming and No Name advertise. The people who covered the retreat of the residents of Fiery Capital were not the local Salamandra people, but the 7-digit number of No Name people from the outer gate. Although the enemy was too strong, this also reflected Wu Ming's strength. Simply put, Salamandra was at a disadvantage no matter what. Although Mandela did not fully understand the situation, in his opinion, Absolute Evil's release definitely had something to do with Wu Ming. The group of suspicious people at the entrance had obviously come from Salamandra. Since Wu Ming was able to stop the group of suspicious people at the entrance of Salamandra, if Wu Ming said that he was not aware of the situation, Mandela would not believe him at all. If Wu Ming had told Salamandra earlier, things would not have turned out this way. However, back then, Mandela did not tell Wu Ming what was sealed in Salamandra. It was his own doing. In short, although Mandela had some complaints about Wu Ming, he could only grit his teeth and swallow it. Moreover, Absolute Evil's seal had been unlocked and there were new changes. At present, he could only ask Wu Ming to temporarily stall Absolute Evil. However, if Wu Ming knew that Shadora was helping him advertise, he would not know whether to laugh or cry. Wu Ming did not know what AZ Dakaha was like in the past, but after fusing with the Black Mud, AZ Dakaha was originally living well in the source of the Black Mire underground. If Wu Ming had not come, AZ Dakaha would not have come out for a while. If he had to say something, it was Wu Ming who had prompted AZ Dakaha to come out of the underground ahead of time. Wu Ming was very clear about this. Therefore, if Wu Ming knew that Shadora had helped him and his community gain a wave of fame, he would probably be embarrassed for a while. However, Wu Ming was not likely to think about these things now. After all, the enemy was right in front of them. Wu Ming infused the countless magical powers in his body into the divine blade of salvation. The entire sun at the tip of the sword underwent an indescribable change. Of course, this was only in the eyes of outsiders. In the eyes of Wu Ming and AZ Dakaha, this sun was filled with lethality. It was especially so for AZ Dakaha. At this moment, he felt a threat to his life. Roar! The black monster spread its black dragon wings and scattered a large amount of black mud in an attempt to rush up to Wu Ming and gain the upper hand by striking first. However, Wu Ming naturally wouldn't give AZ Dakaha this opportunity. His arm that was holding the divine blade of salvation swung down abruptly, and the sun at the tip of the sword struck straight at AZ Dakaha. In an instant, the two of them collided. Scorching flames and incomparably dazzling white light shrouded everyone's eyes. At this moment, Golden Flame City was brighter than during the day. Shortly after, the aftermath of the explosion erupted in the sky and swept in all directions. The scale of the heat wave was so huge that everyone who had retreated from Golden Flame City couldn't help but extend their arms to support their bodies to resist the heat wave. It's really like the sun. Mandela poked his head out. Although the sun in the sky had disappeared, the aftermath of the explosion was still emitting light and extreme heat. Golden Flame City was still as bright as day. Besides, Mandela was filled with all sorts of emotions after witnessing Wu Ming's strength once again. Wu Ming was still in existence that no one dared to look up to. However, unlike Mandela, the others were more concerned about whether the monster had been defeated by Wu Ming. Has it been defeated? It was unknown who said this. At this moment, before the aftermath of the explosion in the sky dissipated, a black figure fell from the sky. Everyone focused their gaze and realized that it was the black monster. The monster was defeated by the hero. However, before everyone could rejoice, they realized that the black mire on the ground had begun to extend toward the sky as if it was going to catch the monster. In fact, that was indeed the case. The black monster was caught by the high platform made of black mire. The monster stood firm and looked at the sky again, as if provoking the hero who had just shot it down. This was also a signal that the monster had not been defeated by the hero. It had only been shot down, and the danger was still there. Cover the evacuation of the residents immediately. Mandela, who saw this scene, immediately ordered the members of Salamandra. Mandela thought to himself, as expected, it's impossible for the opponent to be defeated by a non-human existence in the final trial. Golden Flame City was no longer safe, and the entire outer gate of 54,545 was no longer safe either. They had to evacuate from this outer gate as soon as possible. Yes. Some of the members of Salamandra seemed to have yet to react to the series of events just now. They were stunned for a while before agreeing. After Mandela's reminder, all the residents of Golden Flame City hurriedly took action. They were not fools. It was obvious that the monster could not be killed in a short time. Moreover, the black mire was still spreading, so they had to retreat to a safer place. Fortunately, because they had just experienced the Demon King's attack during the day, not all the residents of Golden Flame City returned to Golden Flame City. In addition, the people of Box Ting were used to various disasters, so the following retreat was more orderly. If it were ordinary people in the outside world, the fire caused by the black mire would have burned everyone to ashes. Wu Ming, who was flying high in the sky, looked at the people around Golden Flame City gradually dispersing. He was inexplicably relieved. Chapter 858. Wu Ming could not understand what was going on in the minds of the residents of the box. In the face of such a disaster, they just stood around and watched? Why were they so calm? But at least they retreated in the end. With that in mind, Wu Ming looked down at Aziz Dakaha, who was staring at him like an abyss. In this way, Wu Ming could deal with this guy with peace of mind. According to the information provided by Galji, Aziz Dakaha, the absolute evil, was originally an evil god at the peak of evil in the Persian Zoroastrianism mythology. For some reason he became the absolute evil in one of the final trials of humans in the box. Wu Ming was not afraid of Aziz Dakaha. After all, he was just an evil god. Wu Ming had never been afraid of gods. The half-godslayer authority he obtained in the godslayer world constantly reminded Wu Ming that Aziz was a god that needed to be killed. The reason why it was half-godslayer was because Wu Ming's previous deeds had been completed in the godslayer world, and he had obtained the half-godslayer qualification. Wu Ming had left his inheritance in Uruk, and he had killed the last king, Rama, and replaced him. It could be said that Wu Ming was a contradictory existence that was both a godslayer and a god. However, Aziz Dakaha was not just an evil god in the Zoroastrianism. In this box, he had become one of the final trials of humans. And in the final trial of humans he had to be defeated, surpassed, by humans. This was why Mandela wanted Wu Ming to temporarily stall Aziz Dakaha instead of defeating him. But that attack just now should have killed Aziz Dakaha, right? Yes, Wu Ming's blow just now did hit Aziz Dakaha. And Aziz Dakaha's breath at that time was also in a state of death. The Blade of Salvation was a so-called planet-destroying weapon. Even if Aziz Dakaha was an evil god, he would not be able to withstand the powerful blow of the Blade of Salvation in a head-on clash. That was why Wu Ming said that he had killed Aziz Dakaha. However, Wu Ming had subconsciously forgotten that this was the Box Garden world. The fire worship sect's three-headed demonic dragon, Aziz Dakaha, had indeed died. However, humans would never be killed by non-human beings in the final trial. Therefore, Quan Ting's system allowed Aziz Dakaha to come back to life. "You can't kill me, my old enemy." At this moment, Aziz Dakaha spoke, but for some reason all three of his heads spoke at the same time, speaking with emphasis to Wu Ming. "You still have self-awareness." Wu Ming was shocked. After all, no matter who it was, they would think that the three-headed monster that was covered in black mud, and whose original appearance could not be seen clearly, and could only roar furiously, had lost its mind. "I am evil to begin with. How can I be controlled by this filth?" Aziz Dakaha's three heads replied together in a mocking tone to Wu Ming. When the black mud came into contact with Aziz Dakaha, the black mud had already become evil filth, under Aziz Dakaha's evil nature. Therefore, it was not wrong for Aziz Dakaha to call the black mud filth. Moreover, a monster should maintain the appearance of a monster. Have you ever seen a monster talk to another person? It was still a mocking tone, But it also explained why Aziz Dakaha had not spoken before. Aziz Dakaha had always followed the rules of Quan Ting. He was a monster that gave humans the final trial. How could a monster talk to a human? You keep saying that you are a monster, but you talk to me. Don't you find that very contradictory? Wu Ming asked in return. But you are also not a human, my kind. Ha ha ha. The three-headed dragon laughed loudly. The laughter of the three heads was indeed very penetrating. Even the retreating troops outside the city could hear the evil laughter. Aziz Dakaha was not wrong. He had already fused with the black mud, and could be considered half of Wu Ming's kind. However, this did not mean that Wu Ming would reconcile with Aziz Dakaha. I do hope that you, the so-called one of my kind, can obediently return to your own seal. That's impossible. My kind. Aziz Dakaha's three heads stared at Wu Ming. If I don't kill you, I won't be able to take it. For example, humans had to eat and drink. As an existence that had fused with the black mud, Aziz Dakaha was hostile to Wu Ming due to the black mud. This caused Aziz Dakaha to half-willingly choose to eliminate Wu Ming. What's more, I still have the responsibility of giving the humans the final trial. If I don't destroy the humans, I will also feel terrible. Ha ha ha. Aziz Dakaha's words were as casual as if he was talking about eating and drinking. Wu Ming could not understand the meaning behind Aziz Dakaha's words. Then, Wu Ming pointed the divine blade of salvation at Aziz Dakaha. Then there is nothing to talk about between us. I will destroy you, just like those guys before. You will not be able to do it. If you want to know why, it is because... Aziz Dakaha lowered his head, then suddenly raised it. I will destroy you here and now. After saying that, countless black mud turned into giant pillar-like tentacles that rushed into the sky like poisonous snakes that were about to prey on birds. Then you can try. Wu Ming said as he charged at Aziz Dakaha. While dodging the tentacles, Wu Ming thought of a way to deal with Aziz Dakaha. Aziz Dakaha had just admitted that Wu Ming had indeed killed him. But there was no doubt that he had immediately revived. According to the information provided by Galji, according to the rules of the box court, in order to kill absolute evil, one had to destroy the other party's head, shoulders and heart. It was said that the head and shoulders had been permanently damaged, so all one had to do was destroy absolute evil's heart. However, this method would not work on Wu Ming. It would be fine if it was just absolute evil, but the problem was that the other party had already fused with the black mud. The permanent damage to the head and shoulders could not be seen at all. Moreover, who knew if Aziz Dakaha's original weakness had changed after fusing with the black mud? Even if it was still his weakness, Wu Ming did not think that absolute evil would die just because his head, shoulders, and heart were destroyed. Absolute evil's revival was a good example. Therefore, according to the rules of the box court world, I have to solve the human's final trial, absolute evil gift game to stop Aziz Dakaha from reviving. Chapter 859. Wu Ming had his reasons for thinking this way. As the human's final trial, there must be a setting where only a human can completely kill the other party. In order to prevent Aziz Dakaha from reviving, one must solve the riddle of the human's final trial, absolute evil. In the end, all the conditions were met, and one must possess enough strength to kill Aziz Dakaha. Wu Ming's personal guess was that only by meeting all three of these conditions could absolute evil Aziz Dakaha be completely killed. Wu Ming definitely had the strength. As for the wisdom to solve the bestowment game, Wu Ming believed that he could solve the riddle of absolute evil, if given some time. However, he could not achieve the first condition of being a human no matter what. Even if his soul was extremely close to that of a human, and he had a human name, Wu Ming was still an inhuman existence. He was the root dragon. Therefore, Wu Ming could not kill absolute evil by normal means. The reason why it was normal was because of the restrictions brought about by the root dragon's exempt box system. Although Wu Ming could participate in the bestowment game, the punishment for failing the bestowment game would not take effect on Wu Ming. Wu Ming, who had the identity of the root dragon, did not need to comply with these three conditions from the beginning. He could rely on his own strength to kill Aziz Dakaha. However, Aziz Dakaha had the root black mud. The root black mud might have brought unexpected benefits to Azh-Dakaha. For example, it made Wuming unclear of Azh-Dakaha's current abilities, intelligence, and weaknesses. However, as Wuming was the nemesis of the root black mud, the root black mud could be said to have given Wuming an advantage in dealing with Azh-Dakaha. That was all there was to the nemesis. Wuming could completely ignore the series of conditions that he had deduced earlier, and directly kill Azh-Dakaha. Therefore, from the beginning, Wuming only needed to use the power of the root dragon to ignore all factors, and achieve the conditions to directly kill Azh-Dakaha. Of course, Wuming only thought of this now, but there was a blind spot at the moment. Whether this body can produce the power of origin is another matter. While dodging the black mud tentacles, Wuming could not help but frown. Although when he returned to the box, Wuming adjusted the spiritual base to the perfect standard for a servant, Wuming was still unsure whether it could produce the power of origin. As the clones of the heroic spirits, the attributes of the servant's interface were fixed. Wuming's spiritual base was the same. Although Wuming had broken this rule a few times, there was a reason for it. When he fought against Garna, the last noble phantasm that Wuming used was a temporarily modified noble phantasm. The reason why it could be like that was because at that time, Wuming's servant identity was Sodlek, which was a character that Wuming had fabricated in history, so he could change it however he wanted. Secondly, the world at that time was the native world of the inhibitors, and the inhibitors had a lot of power at that time, so they did not want the humans to be burned down. Because of these 2 points, Wuming's spiritual base could be arbitrarily modified on the spot at that time. Also, relying on the power of the Holy Grail to modify the spiritual base, Wuming changed from Saber Sodlek to Caster Uruk Hyenryong. After all, the Holy Grail was a cheat, and Wuming himself was also a cheat, so it was not surprising that he could do this. Now, if Wuming wanted to modify the spiritual base on the spot, apart from being in the root, he had to rely on Wuming's own body, or his original body. The first time Wuming used the power of the root was when he faced Gitia. Although he could use it inexplicably because Wuming's body had stayed in the root for a long time, his body had evolved, so Wuming, who often used his clones, was not very clear about it. However, it was the innate power of the root dragon, so it was reasonable for Wuming to master it. However, Wuming's experience of using the power of the root was only that one time. After all, since then Wuming's body fell into the box garden world and disappeared. Now that he didn't have the Holy Grail, nor did he have any restraining power, and his main body was nowhere to be seen, Wuming had no way to change his current spirit base. Wuming clearly sensed the aura of his original body just now, but he couldn't sense it now. If Wuming didn't look for Shadora, he might be able to find his original body. But if he didn't look for Shadora, it should be certain that something would happen to Shadora today. However, Wuming didn't regret it. Although he hated Mandela, he didn't hate Shadora. This little girl who worked hard for the community made him realize that Shadora was worth Wuming saving. Anyway, even if Wuming didn't save Shadora and directly went to the location of his original body, Wuming might not be able to find his original body. After all, Azh-Dakaha was there. I'm afraid that my original body was covered by the black mud again. If there was anything that Wuming could think of that could conceal his original body's aura, it would be the black mud. Or perhaps my original body is now in Azh-Dakaha's body. While pondering, Wuming avoided the black mud tentacles and arrived before Azh-Dakaha. Roar! Azh-Dakaha wasn't afraid of Wuming. He stood up in his human form and coalesced a huge blade from the black mud, slashing it at Wuming. Wuming raised his divine blade of salvation to meet the attack. Countless lightning of salvation attached to the divine blade of salvation exploded. In an instant, Azh-Dakaha, who had already stabilized his body, pointed at Wuming. Countless black mud tentacles flew around Wuming and wrapped Wuming into a sphere that kept compressing. At this moment, a thunderous sound came from the sphere formed by the black mud tentacles wrapped around Wuming. Boom! Then, the black mud sphere slowly disintegrated, revealing Wuming in the center of the sphere unharmed. Wuming's spirit base couldn't produce origin power on its own, but as an entity that had fused with Wuming's main body, The divine blade of salvation had also been strengthened to a certain extent during the Great Origin. While it couldn't completely suppress the Black Origin soil, it was still tainted with a bit of origin power. Combined with the divine blade of salvation's extraordinary nature, the divine blade of salvation should be able to deal with a certain amount of Black Origin soil. It should be noted that the divine saber of salvation could easily kill Aziz Dakaha with a single strike. The best example was the divine saber of salvation's ability to kill Aziz Dakaha with a single strike. But that wasn't enough. Just relying on the divine blade of salvation was not enough to kill the final trial's absolute evil, Aziz Dakaha. After all, a quantitative change would lead to a qualitative change. Aziz Dakaha had now become a vessel for secreting the black mud. Just relying on the divine blade of salvation was not enough. You're still somewhat capable, aren't you? Aziz Dakaha said as a pair of black shadow-like wings appeared on his back. Then the black mud on Aziz Dakaha's body spread over his wings. His shadow wings became tainted wings filled with black mud. Then let's continue. Let's continue our fight. Chapter 860. Shadora flew in the sky above the 54545 outer gate, and looked at the 54545 outer gate with a worried expression. She couldn't sense what was going on inside the gate. A day had passed. At this moment, the entire 54545 outer gate was completely covered by the black mud. However, the people of the 54545 outer gate and their communities had all evacuated from the 54545 outer gate because of Wuming's cover. After all, there was no effective way to stop the black mud from spreading. Everyone in the 54545 outer gate could only retreat. In the end, they relied on the boundary wall of the outer gate to stop the black mud from spreading. However, the boundary wall couldn't be used anymore. Not only that, but many places, or rather, the buildings of the entire 54545 outer gate had changed. The black mud seemed to have made a lot of irregular changes in the shape of the original buildings. Not only did it make the 54545 outer gate unrecognizable, but it also blocked the sky of the entire 54545 outer gate like a lush black forest. Moreover, the second change of the black mud also connected, making the 54545 outer gate look like a huge mountain with a lot of holes. One thing was certain. The entire 54545 outer gate had completely turned into Aziz Dakaha's black mud territory. Moreover, it seemed that the black mud had the ability to block detection. The people of the 54545 outer gate couldn't find out what was going on inside, including whether Wuming was alive or dead. There was no movement inside at all. However, the people of the box court couldn't just sit there and wait for death. The members of Salamandra who had retreated from the 54545 outer gate had already united a large number of communities in the surrounding outer gates to form a battle line around the 54545 outer gate. The purpose was to prevent the black mud from spreading. Although the black mud wasn't spreading now, who knew when the black mud would break through the boundary wall and start spreading? It wasn't too late to mend the pen after the sheep were lost, right? The reason why the other communities were so obedient was because Shadora had revealed that the enemy who attacked Glowing Flame Capital and the entire 54545 outer gate was absolutely evil. Moreover, the leader of this alliance was the strongest demon in the North District, Vera Za Ignifast, which was why they were willing to compromise. Moreover, there was nothing they could do even if they did not compromise. If the enemy was absolutely evil, they would definitely die if they did not unite. This was without a doubt. If they were united, there was still hope for survival. Shadora, so you're here, Mandela said in a heavy tone as he flew to Shadora's side. Big brother, will Master Villo be alright? Shadora looked at Mandela worriedly. Seeing his sister's expression, Mandela turned his head to the side. You're the ruler of the hierarchy. Don't always show such an expression. Whether Wuming was fine or not, they had to do their best to survive and think of a way to deal with AZ Dakaha. This was a matter of life and death. Although Mandela didn't answer Shadora directly, she understood what he meant. After all, they were siblings. It's hard to believe. If even Master Villo can't deal with the enemy, can we really deal with it? Shadora said as she looked at the changed outer gate of 54,545 outer gate. And our house. It changed completely in just a day. However, even if it didn't change, it would probably be destroyed by absolute evil. I've already sent out a distress signal to the other classes, and reported this to the higher-ups of the box court. If nothing goes wrong, the Sky Army should be here soon. The so-called Sky Army was a special force formed by the upper echelons of the box court to suppress the humans in the final trial. Although not everyone knew about the existence of the Sky Army, Shadora naturally knew about it as the leader of the upper echelons. And Mandela was Shadora's assistant, so he knew about the existence of the Sky Army. Master White Wuxia just replied to me. She said she'll rush over from the East District soon. Don't worry, Mandela comforted Shadora. And Villo isn't weak. I think even if he can't kill absolute evil, he won't be killed by absolute evil. That's true. Shadora sighed and flew to the ground. Seeing Shadora leave, Mandela couldn't help but sigh. Of course Mandela, who didn't know Wuming very well, said this to comfort Shadora. As one of the oldest Godslayers, absolute evil wasn't even afraid of a 2-digit number. Even if Wuming was stronger than a 3-digit number, in Mandela's opinion, it was unlikely that he would survive after fighting absolute evil alone for a day. Absolute evil didn't move at the moment. Perhaps it was resting and recovering from the injuries caused by the battle with Wuming. Or perhaps it wasn't injured at all, and just didn't want to come out for the time being. Either way, they had to be prepared. However, Mandela could only comfort Shadora like this. Shadora had probably already seen through Mandela's intentions, but she could only think so. This was because only by making everyone think that Wu Ming was still inside, delaying AZ Dakaha, could they create a winnable atmosphere. Otherwise, they might not be able to set up a defensive line around the outer gate of the 54545 division. Facing an enemy who did not put up a defense but ran away blindly, that would only lead to a faster death. I hope the Sky Army can come as soon as possible. If they only relied on Vera and the upcoming White Wuxia to deal with absolute evil, who had undergone an unknown transformation, they would probably be doomed. They could only rely on the Sky Army in the upper echelons of the temple. Then Mandela rode the fire dragon and flew down. At this moment, the intense battle was still ongoing in AZ Dakaha's Black Mud territory. Countless black mud attacked Wuming from all directions, while Wuming floated in place and chanted, "For victory come to me quickly. Undying sun, please bestow upon me a shining steed. Spirited steed, with the lifeline of my root dragon, I bestow upon the eternal glory. Bring me the shining wheel of light that symbolizes me." After Wuming finished chanting, the sun instantly erupted from Wuming's body. Wuming's entire body turned into a fireball. The flames burned hundreds of meters, incinerating the black mud within range. However, even the sun would burn out one day. The fireball incinerated a large amount of black mud, but to AZ Dakaha, who had turned the entire outer gate of the 54545 temple into a black mud territory, and could continuously produce black mud, Wuming's actions were useless. When the fireball burned out, a claw full of power attacked Wuming. However, Wuming had already begun chanting another spirit. "Fear the one with wings. Evil people and powerful people are all afraid of me with wings. My wings will bring you a curse. Evil people will not be able to hit me." Swoosh! As if he had accelerated in an instant, Wuming instantly left his original spot, and the owner of the claw missed. Upon closer inspection, it was the pitch-black AZ Dakaha. Wuming, who had flown to the other side of AZ Dakaha's team, steadied himself and sneered. "Don't always rush over after fainting. This trick has never worked on me from the beginning." However, AZ Dakaha also retorted with sarcastic words. "So what? You can't take advantage of me either." Then, AZ Dakaha smiled smugly. "Don't forget, you are now trapped here by me." Chapter 861. During the day of constant fighting between Wuming and AZ Dakaha, as if excessive destruction would usher in new life, Wuming destroyed a large amount of black mud, but at the same time, a large amount of black mud was produced, causing the black mud to spread faster. It was said that it covered the entire outer gate of 54,545 in a day, but in fact, it was only because the people outside the outer gate of 54,545 discovered that the black mud had spread to the boundary wall a day later. Moreover, the black mud did not stop spreading because of the boundary wall, but only because of Azidakaha's order to trap Wuming. The boundary wall just happened to be a dividing line. During this period, Wuming did not care about how the black mud eroded the outer gate of 54,545. After all, those who should be evacuated had already evacuated. At the same time, Wuming did not care about how the black mud gradually trapped him. Wuming just kept fighting with Azidakaha. And Azidakaha also gave him face. He turned the entire outer gate of 54,545 into his own devil's den, not only to besiege Wuming, but also to prevent others from disturbing the fight between Azidakaha and Wuming. Not only did he satisfy Wuming's desire to fight with Azidakaha, but he also prevented outsiders from interfering. As for why, it was because it was related to Wuming's plan. Although it seemed that Wuming was now trapped in this devil's den full of black mud, in fact, Wuming was indeed trapped. Whether it was entering the inherent barrier or leaving through the teleportation gate, they were all stopped by Azidakaha's magic. It had to be known that Azidakaha was rumored to have mastered over 1,000 types of magic. Although the final trial was absolutely evil, Azidakaha was still Azidakaha. He could still use over 1,000 types of magic. The boundary and portal were theoretically just the use of space. As long as magic was used properly, it could naturally be blocked. However, Wuming did not panic at all. After all, he did not want to leave just like that. Azidakaha was hostile to Wuming. This was true. In the continuous confrontation with Azidakaha, Wuming became more and more certain of this. Usually, people who had the black mud would become Wuming's enemy or treat Wuming as an enemy. However, Azidakaha was really serious this time. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was an obsession. As the final trial of humans, Azidakaha was obsessed with eliminating Wuming first instead of fulfilling his duties as the final trial of humans. This in itself was very abnormal. The rules of the box could not be violated by anyone other than Wuming. Although there were some people who took advantage of loopholes, they could only take advantage of small and harmless loopholes. It was simply impossible to take advantage of the box's loopholes. The humans' final trial was the same. Azidakaha, who had been released from the seal, didn't give the humans a trial. Instead, he was competing with Wuming here. This was something that was impossible to happen. It was not a problem to fight back against an enemy, but Azidakaha clearly wanted to fight to the death with Wuming before doing anything else. Perhaps because of the purity of the black mud, Azidakaha's enmity towards Wuming had risen to the level of obsession. The power of the black mud had even placed Azidakaha's duties as the final trial of humans behind his obsession with Wuming. Therefore, as long as Wuming was still around, Azidakaha would not take on the duties of the final trial of humans. Simply put, Wuming had a taunt on him that Azidakaha did not notice at all. Although Wuming did not want to taunt Azidakaha at first, he felt that this would restrain Azidakaha and prevent him from harming the outside world. In addition, Wuming had his own ideas. Therefore, he and Azidakaha fought in the Devil's Den for an entire day, or rather, an entire night. Azidakaha was released at night. Now, although Wuming could not see the weather outside, based on Wuming's sense of time, it was almost nighttime. After a day of fighting, Wuming more or less understood what he needed to understand. Do you still have time to be distracted? The 3-meter-tall Azidakaha took advantage of Wuming's momentary distraction to rush in front of Wuming. A huge dragon claw covered in black mud viciously pressed down on Wuming's face. Isn't that a given? After all, even if I'm distracted, you can't do anything to me. Ever since he started fighting with Azidakaha, Wuming's psychic energy had been released from his body. As long as anything came within 100 meters of him, Wuming could instantly sense it and react. Relying on the power of the Sun and Phoenix of the 12 avatars, this was why Wuming could deal with Azidakaha for a day. Using Giant to wrestle in close combat, using Vitality to recover himself from time to time, and whenever he was surrounded by black mud, He would use sun to burn it, and then use phoenix to move. Simply put, it felt like Wuming was playing with Az Dakaha all this time. No, it couldn't be said that, because, lightning, lightning, lightning. I am the conqueror who can defeat 1,000 with white, 10,000 with 1,000, and 10,000 with 10,000. Now, for me who stands on the side of justice, please shine brightly and bestow upon me divine power. I am the one who will crush all enemies and enmity from humans and demons. Wuming, who was facing Az Dakaha's palm, quickly chanted the power of Thunder God. Wuming himself turned into lightning and quickly distanced himself from Az Dakaha. At the same time, he also used lightning to injure Az Dakaha, causing an extremely temporary paralysis effect on Az Dakaha. Turning off the Thunder God avatar, Wuming's figure appeared, but the hand that Wuming used to fight with Az Dakaha was pitch black as if it was poisoned. However, as if he had already adapted to this, Wuming didn't panic at all. Then Wuming chanted the power of divine power again. A person with the supreme divine power of protection. The gods protect him, the demons hate him, and no enemy can get close to him. He is like a fountain of vitality that surges endlessly, granting the world equal protection. After he finished chanting, Wuming's arm returned to normal. Chapter 862. Sure enough, it's not only the blade of salvation that has the aura of origin, but so does my authority. In fact, Wuming had long discovered that his authority had a weak restraining effect on Az Dakaha, or rather, the black mud on Az Dakaha's body. After all, the 12 avatars were the same as the blade of salvation. They were existences that had been baptized together with Wuming in the origin, so they naturally carried the aura of origin. In other words, his authority also had the ability to restrain Az Dakaha, although it was very weak. Similarly, the vitality also had a certain recovery effect on the corrosive damage caused by the black mud. So Wuming, who previously did not dare to fight Az Dakaha in close combat, dared to do so now. However, because the recovery effect was not very optimistic, Wuming could not excessively come into close contact with Az Dakaha for too long. If he came into contact with him too much, the vitality avatar would lose its effectiveness. However, this power alone was far from enough. Whether it was the blade of salvation or the 12 avatars, they contained too little power of origin. Even if Az Dakaha was killed in an instant, Az Dakaha would be healed by the black mud. In addition, this place had now become Az Dakaha's black mud cave. If he did not clean up all the black mud, Az Dakaha's injuries caused by origin would completely disappear as soon as he came into contact with the black mud. No, perhaps even injuries not caused by origin would be healed by Az Dakaha. For example, right now, although Az Dakaha had injured Wuming in the previous exchange of blows, he had also been injured by a trace of origin power in Wuming's Thunder God avatar. However, a black mud tentacle approached Az Dakaha and gently touched him. Az Dakaha's injuries were immediately healed, and it was impossible to tell that he was injured at all. From this, it could be seen that Wuming was still unable to completely destroy Az Dakaha. Without power, you can't do anything to me. You can only be a lowly mouse in my cage, being toyed with by me. Ha. It was as if he was quite satisfied with Wuming's helpless look, but his laughter only added to the despair. Wuming wasn't a human. Wuming wasn't human. After adjusting his breathing, Wuming began to ponder. According to Az Dakaha, it seemed like he had never used his full strength, and was only playing with Wuming. Wuming did not think that Az Dakaha was bluffing. Az Dakaha had once fought against millions of gods and was not at a disadvantage. Although there were only 3 digits of him, he was no weaker than the 2 digits of humans in the final trial. Just the god spirit level body created from his blood alone was enough to make him suffer. By the way, this information was obtained from Galji by Wuming's clone. This information was mixed in with the Lune runes from before. Perhaps it was because Az Dakaha was covered in black mud, but Wuming had never seen Az Dakaha use the blood clone technique. However, this technique should be considered passive and could not be used actively. Moreover, Aziz Dakaha's blood had probably been assimilated into the black mud. Did that mean this technique could not be used? Wu Ming was overthinking things. Since the blood had been assimilated by the black mud, didn't that mean the black mud was Aziz Dakaha's blood? Roar! Suddenly, Aziz Dakaha roared. Under Wu Ming's solemn expression, blurry things appeared from the black mud. There was no doubt that these were Aziz Dakaha's clones. Roar, roar, roar. These indistinguishable black clones roared in unison, and then rushed in Wu Ming's direction, or it could be said that they were carried by the black mud and flew over. It seemed that Aziz Dakaha was not prepared to continue playing with Wu Ming. Coincidentally, Wu Ming had the same thought. God says humans are sinful. God says humans need to be purified. Thus, I bestow the flood upon my body. In the name of the Supreme King, I will grant the people of the world equal relief. Wu Ming slowly chanted the spirit of words until the Aziz Dakaha clone at the front was extremely close to Wu Ming. The spirit of words had just finished chanting. In an instant, an ocean-like wave surged out of nowhere from Wu Ming's back, washing away all of Aziz Dakaha's doppelgangers and a large amount of black mud. In an instant, the flood erupted. The flood that submerged the entire outer gate of 54,545 caused Aziz Dakaha to raise his height. He was clearly surprised by Wu Ming's move. Without stopping, Wu Ming extended his left hand and continued to chant other spirit of words. Thou hast violated the contract and brought sin to the world. Lord's day, sinners shall be punished. Crush their backs, dig out their bones, hair, and brains, and trample on their blood and mud. If I am the one who cannot approach the darkness, I will follow the words of the Lord and destroy thee. The flood changed color and turned black. At the same time, the flood also changed in nature. The black mud was being eroded by the flood that was mixed with twice the original power. It was quite shocking. But just the combination of the flood and annihilation avatars was not enough to have a serious effect on the black mud. And because of the mutual restraint, the black mud was also slowly devouring the black flood that submerged the outer gate of 54,545. I didn't expect you to have such a trump card. Aziz Dakaha praised Wu Ming. Whether it was the flood or annihilation avatars, Aziz Dakaha didn't know about them. Or rather, Wu Ming deliberately didn't use them in order to catch him off guard. But this alone isn't enough. Aziz Dakaha seemed to be mocking Wu Ming. The shadow wings on his back suddenly spread out, and a large amount of black mud seemed to be recreated. It swarmed out from Aziz Dakaha's back, and increased the amount of black mud. It also accelerated the rate at which the black mud was eroding the Black Sea. But what surprised Aziz Dakaha even more was what came next. Lightning! 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 I am the conqueror who can defeat 1,000 with white, 10,000 with 1,000, and 10,000 with 10,000. Now, for me who stands on the side of justice, please shine brightly and bestow me with divine power. Reaching out his right hand, Wu Ming chanted a new incantation. Countless thunderbolts mixed into the black flood. The black flood with thunderbolts was temporarily on par with the replenished black mud. At this moment, Wu Ming's two outstretched hands suddenly clasped together. I am the one who will crush all enemies and enmity between humans and demons. Suddenly, Wu Ming adjusted the Thunder God avatar to the maximum output. Suddenly, the area contained by the Black Sea, or rather, the entire outer door of the 54545 division, was filled with thunderbolts. The Black Sea instantly became a sea of thunderbolts. However, the large amount of thunderbolts didn't spread to the surroundings. Instead, they evaporated the entire Black Sea. The entire Black Sea was disappearing at a speed visible to the naked eye. Is his brain damaged? Or is it that he didn't control his moves well? Aziz Dakaha mocked Wu Ming's play of his own attack cancelling out his own attack. But then, Aziz Dakaha realized that something was wrong, because his entire black mud den was covered in fog. Chapter 863. What are you trying to do? Aziz Dakaha couldn't help but shout. The black ocean that had been evaporated by the Thunder God's incarnation had now turned into mist and filled the entire black mud cave. Moreover, from the outside, Billowing white fog could be seen emerging from the numerous holes in the black mud cave, as if the interior was on fire. The thick fog had indeed attracted the attention of outsiders. "What's that?" someone shouted. Some people noticed the mist that was coming out of the cave. Gradually, the large number of community members surrounding the 54545 barrier put down their work one by one and looked at the devil's den that was emitting thick fog. Many brave people flew into the sky, hoping to observe from a closer distance. Smoke? No, it's mist. Mandela rode a flying dragon into the sky. It would be easier to investigate the mist. After checking the defensive grace that he had prepared, Mandela piloted the wyvern in the direction of the fog to begin his investigation. In the sky not far away, White Yiksha was flying toward them. Because they knew the seriousness of the matter, the outer gates around the 54545 outer gate had been controlled by the North District's hierarchy and sealed off. As a result, White Yiksha could only move to the nearest outer gate that was sealed off and use his own methods to come over. White Yiksha, who had no convenient method, could only fly over. This power. The thick fog also attracted White Yiksha, who had just rushed over. This caused White Yiksha, who was about to land, to give up on his plan. Instead, he headed straight for the devil's den. Wuming had used flood in front of White Yiksha. The mist was very similar to Wuming's flood. Or rather, it had the exact same aura. How could it not attract White Yiksha's attention? In the temporary meeting room of the 54545 Outer Gate Alliance, Shadora, who was alone with Vera to discuss the situation, also ran out because of the mist. Vera was the same. "Villo," Vera muttered softly. She jumped and flew up as well. Wait a minute, Master Vera?" Shadora immediately followed after seeing this. Just as Shadora and Vera flew into the sky, the White Yiksha, who happened to encounter them, issued a warning. "Don't get too close. I'm afraid the mist is corrosive." White Yiksha had witnessed the might of the outer sex sea of annihilation. Absolute Evil's clone had died without a trace. This fog probably had a similar ability. "Lord White Yiksha, have you arrived?" Shadora was rather surprised to see White Yiksha here. "I just arrived not long ago. When I saw the changes here, I immediately rushed over." White Yiksha nodded at Shadora and Vera. "We rushed over because we saw the changes here," Shadora replied. Then Shadora looked at the temporary base of the community. Taking a closer look, these communities seemed to be very close to the boundary wall. If the corrosive mist were to spread, it would be terrible. Shadora asked. "Lord White Yiksha, do we need to inform the surrounding communities to retreat?" Although she was in the same class as White Yiksha, compared to White Yiksha, there was nothing wrong with Shadora asking White Yiksha whether it was strength or experience. However, Vera answered Shadora instead of White Yiksha. "This is a gift from the Villo. It has the aura of a Villo." Vera meant that there was no need to retreat. Not only that, but Vera also gave White Yiksha the urge to rush in. "Don't act rashly, Vera." Seeing that Vera had such an impulse, White Yiksha said to Vera. Then White Yiksha turned to Shadora. "Let's get the others to retreat first. After all, I don't know what's going on inside." "Okay, Lord White Yiksha. I'll inform everyone now." But at this moment a figure fell from the sky. "That's Big Brother Mandela?" Shadora was shocked. Why did Mandela fall from the sky all of a sudden? Could it be that he was in danger? Although they didn't know what happened to Mandela, White Yiksha and the others wouldn't watch Mandela fall just like that. Swish! Suddenly, White Yiksha shot out at the speed of a rocket, easily rescuing the fallen Mandela, and the wyvern carrying Mandela. Vera and Shadora also flew over one after the other. "Big Brother Mandela?" Shadora yelled and flew to White Yiksha's side. White Yiksha held the unconscious wyvern in one hand, and the unconscious Mandela in the other. His expression was rather solemn. No matter if it was the wyvern or Mandela's body, or rather, their skin was filled with burn marks. They must have been accidentally corroded by the spreading mist during the investigation. "But don't worry, it's just a severe burn on the skin," White Yiksha said and handed the wyvern and Mandela to Shadora. Perhaps a severe burn on the skin outside the box was a serious injury, but it was only a minor injury inside the box. Moreover, Mandela was a subspecies of the fire dragon and had a certain resistance to fire damage, so Mandela wasn't seriously injured. Shadora, after bringing Mandela back, immediately informed the surrounding communities to retreat by 10 kilometers and pay attention to any changes here. If there's no other way, retreat further. Yes, Sir White Yiksha. Shadora, who was concerned about her brother, nodded immediately and flew down with Mandela and the wyvern. Then, White Yiksha looked at the mist released by the demon's den and said to Vera, "It can even burn a subspecies of the fire dragon, and it looks like the aftermath." "This mist isn't simple," White Yiksha said. Although she knew that Wuming was powerful, Wuming always brought her new surprises. "The villa is in danger," Vera said and was about to barge in again. "Is this really okay?" Perhaps because there were no outsiders, White Yiksha's rather strange words entered Vera's ears. "Although the villa isn't safe, it isn't dangerous either. I know that guy better than thou." No matter what, White Yiksha had the advantage over Vera in terms of time and understanding. That guy isn't someone who can be defeated easily, even if the opponent is absolute evil. Otherwise, Wuming wouldn't have been able to create such a huge commotion after fighting with Az Dakaha for a day. Although that was the case, it wasn't a reason to stop Vera. Knowing this, White Yiksha immediately flew in front of Vera and spoke again. "Who knows, it might be a crucial moment now. If thou barge in, it might ruin the villa's plan." Ugh! Vera was instantly embarrassed. It had to be said that this was exactly what Vera wanted. Indeed, after all, Wuming and Az Dakaha had been fighting inside for a day. What if it was a crucial moment now and Vera suddenly barged in and disrupted it? It's better for us to stay on the periphery and observe the situation. However, at this moment, a heat wave that distorted space shot out from a corner of the demon's den and crashed into the boundary wall, causing a shocking explosion. Chapter 864. The timeline jumped forward a few minutes. The fog created by Wuming's thunder god avatar had yet to spread outside. A large amount of fog was concentrated in the devil's den, which was not very permeable, and would not dissipate in a short time. First, the fog corroded the interior of the devil's den, and the interior of the devil's den was completely filled with black mud. Hiss! When the fog came into contact with the black mud, there was the sound of something being corroded. The corroded black mud had no choice but to passively endure it because the fog was too small. Unless the black mud filled the entire devil's den, it would not be able to do anything. "What is this?" Az Dakaha recognized the nature of the mist. Az Dakaha was surprised to see the true nature of the fog. It was a black sea of gas molecules, and these molecules carried the power of flood and annihilation. It was this power that was constantly corroding the black mud. However, as these gas molecules corroded the black mud, the fog molecules themselves were also dying. After all, the black mud also had the ability to corrode. When the gas molecules corroded the black mud, they would also be corroded by the black mud. It could be said that even if the black mud could only passively endure it, it would not suffer much. However, these gas molecules were originally sacrificial pawns. Their purpose was to provide cover for Wuming, so it did not matter if they were used up. Since it was to provide cover, Wuming naturally had plans to do something. As an existence with a similar mind, Az Dakaha would not just wait for Wuming to continue. Don't even think about it. No matter what Wuming wanted to do, Az Dakaha would not let Wuming have his way. As he spoke, Az Dakaha opened his mouth. The inside of his mouth was also covered in black mud. It was so dark that no one could tell what it originally looked like. Only his black fangs were as sharp as ever. In this pitch-black mouth, flashes of flame suddenly appeared between the fangs and moved restlessly. In an instant, Wuming, who was hidden in the fog, could clearly feel that the world had begun to shake. Legend had it that the three-headed mystic dragon was a human king who was guided by the evil god of the sect of fire, Ngola Manuel. Before he was defeated, he had destroyed a third of the world. This inheritance that destroyed a third of the world became Aziz Dakaha's gift in the box court world. It was also known as the strongest gift of the lightning series, the Karina of the Hegemon's halo. At this moment, the radiance of the Karina that Azdakaha spoke of gradually solidified. During this process, a trace of black aura climbed onto the radiance and dyed the Karina black. Without a doubt, it was the source of black mud. No matter what you want to do, I will kill you before you complete it. Azdakaha was prepared to use the Karina mixed with the source of black mud to completely eliminate Wuming. With that, Azdakaha spat out the Karina, which had been strengthened by the black origin soil, towards the ground. An ominous wave of extreme heat shot out from Azdakaha's mouth. It was a heat that could melt steel in an instant. Then an extremely strange scene occurred. A heat ray more than 10 meters in diameter shot out from the 3-meter-tall Azdakaha's mouth. Under Azdakaha's control, it shot straight towards Wuming's position, or rather, the position before the fog covered Wuming's figure. The fog that came into contact with the heat ray disappeared in an instant, and the fog near the heat ray evaporated completely. In the end, the heat ray hit Wuming's position and caused a violent explosion. Not only that, but the Karina continued to be released. In the end, the black mud cave was penetrated, and the Karina was spat out by Azdakaha. But at this moment, Wuming's voice entered Azdakaha's ears. Azdakaha was sure that Wuming was behind him. In other words, Wuming had dodged Azdakaha's prize technique. Perhaps it was the interference of the corrosive fog that caused Azdakaha's perception to drop for a moment, so he didn't notice Wuming's movement. As for Wuming, he had already started chanting the words of the Phoenix incarnation when the fog had covered his body. He arrived behind Azdakaha. However, before Azdakaha could get angry, a feeling of surprise rushed to his mind. For victory, quickly come before me. Undying sun, please bestow upon me a shining steed. The demonic whisper entered Azdakaha's ears, and at the same time, Azdakaha could feel a wave of heat spreading from his back. Immediately after, another sentence of strengthened words came out. Spirited steed, I the lifeblood of the dragon of origin, bestow the eternal glory. Bring me the shining wheel that symbolizes me. The heat was mixed with the aura of a large amount of origin power. It was certain that Wuming was behind Azdakaha, and he was very close. But soon after, Azdakaha had doubts. He couldn't possibly have so much origin power, right? But what was certain was that if Azdakaha was hit by this move, there was a high possibility that he would be killed, ignoring the rules of the box court. It was a huge crisis. But Azdakaha wouldn't just sit there and wait for death. If Silent Wonder's attack hit Azdakaha, then Azdakaha might be able to insta-kill him. However, at such a close distance, if Silent Wonder was hit by Karina's wheel of hegemony, the Karina in his mouth, which had yet to be completely extinguished, once again ignited with a black light. Azdakaha abruptly turned his body and shot it out. A heat ray that was several meters long instantly covered everything in front of Azdakaha. Although the Karina's power and range weren't as strong as before because it wasn't charged, Azdakaha didn't think that Wuming could withstand this attack. Where are you attacking, Azdakaha? Wuming's figure appeared as he spoke. And Wuming's current position was right next to the heat ray that hadn't ended yet. Azdakaha was right. Wuming couldn't withstand the Karina mixed with black mud, but if Azdakaha couldn't hit Wuming, it would be a different matter. It could be said that if Azdakaha had released the Karina, Wuming would have died without a doubt. But Azdakaha had missed. How is this possible? Azdakaha's pitch-black pupils dilated a little. Clearly, he didn't believe that he had made a mistake. Chapter 865. At such a close distance, how could the three-headed demonic dragon, Azdakaha, who was the ultimate evil god of the sect of fire, make a mistake? In Azdakaha's perception, Wuming was clearly behind him. How could he have shifted his position? How could Azdakaha's Karina just miss Wuming by a hair's breadth? Whoosh! A few gusts of wind blew past Azdakaha's face. The fog that was slowly dissipating due to the heat rays was also accelerated by the gusts of wind, causing it to dissipate even faster. The multiple layers of wind will refract light. The principle of light refraction was simple. It was nothing more than the refraction of light through different media at different speeds. Aziz Dakaha's guess was right. Wuming had used the storm incarnation to control the wind, allowing the multiple layers of wind to refract light. This caused Aziz Dakaha's Karina to shift a little bit. As for how to do it, Wuming referred to Altoria's Wind King barrier. As the closest person to Altoria, Wuming was very familiar with everything about Altoria, including the Wind King barrier that Merlin had designed for Altoria to hide Excalibur. Altoria's Wind King barrier was not so much a noble artifact as it was a special magic trick. The principle was simple. It simply used the multiple layers of wind attached to the holy sword to change the refractive index of light to achieve the effect of hiding the sword, preventing the opponent from obtaining information about the weapon. However, the Wind King barrier could only achieve the effect of hiding, and not refracting. It could not shift Wuming's figure, and it was even more difficult to shift Karina, which was mixed with black origin soil. However, with other assistance, there would be no problem. The fog that filled the Devil's Den was the product of Wuming's thunder incarnation to change the form of flood and annihilation. Naturally, it was also Wuming's authority. Thus, it was relatively easy to control. The mist itself was a thin layer of water, but Wuming's mist was an even thinner existence. As everyone knew, water could be refracted. Fog's refraction effect was weaker than water's, but it could still do the same. Whether it was the fog that seemed to be blown away when Aziz Dakaha used Karina, or the fog that combined with wind to shift Wuming's position, it was all done by Wuming. However, a simple refraction of light could not make Aziz Dakaha fall for Wuming's trick. Putting aside Aziz Dakaha's three-digit strength, Aziz Dakaha was also considered a wise man. He was not stupid to that extent. Therefore, relying only on storm, flood, and annihilation was still insufficient. In the end, Wuming activated the rarely used magician incarnation. When the magician incarnation that could perform the miracles of the gods, the storm incarnation that brought with it multiple layers of wind, and the flood incarnation and the annihilation incarnation that were affected by the thunder god incarnation, the combination of these three brought about a trick that fooled Aziz Dakaha. The wind covered Wuming's figure, and the fog refracted Wuming's figure. The god's miracle transformed the two into something that could even deceive the evil god, the ultimate illusion. As Wuming spoke, he raised his head and looked at Aziz Dakaha with a pair of golden eyes. Wuming was not good at illusions, but that did not mean he did not know how to use them. Back in Britain, Wuming was influenced by Merlin's powerful illusions. He had a lot of experience in illusions, and today it came in handy. Although Wuming did not put much effort into illusions, but with the combination of multiple powers, he finally achieved an ultimate illusion that could even deceive the gods. Aziz Dakaha's mistake was the best proof of Wuming's illusion. Just a trick to fool people. How dare you keep me in the dark? Aziz Dakaha was enraged. If Wuming could defeat him in a head-on battle, he would be convinced and would not be angry. After all, Wuming was the root dragon. Even if he was defeated by Wuming, there was nothing to be ashamed of. But Wuming had used a trick like illusions to get behind him. Putting aside the issue of identity, Aziz Dakaha was a three-headed demonic dragon who had mastered thousands of magic spells. It was a great humiliation that he was blinded by illusions. However, Aziz Dakaha did not need to worry about anger. He had no time to dodge. What he needed to think about now was how to deal with Wuming's sun, that had been compressed to the size of a palm, and was about to explode. The heat that he had sensed at the beginning was coming from this sun. Checkmate, Aziz Dakaha. With Wuming's smile, Aziz Dakaha was covered in the light of the sun. Outside the Devil's Den, the members of the community who had formed an alliance around the realm wall were terrified. After Shadora conveyed White Yiksha's instructions, they began to retreat. The huge heat ray that had pierced through the Devil's Den had destroyed a large piece of the realm wall. The aftermath of the explosion had affected many people. Although no one was killed, many were injured. Although the realm wall was not so strong that nothing could destroy it, it was not so easily destroyed. As a huge barrier that divided the community, The quality of the realm wall was naturally guaranteed. Not to mention, there was the existence of the realm gate on the realm wall, which increased the quality of the realm wall to another level. However, it was the strange heat ray that had shot out from the devil's den that had easily destroyed the realm wall. However, they could not be sure who had launched the attack just now. Was it absolute evil? Or was it a hero who was fighting absolute evil? However, they could be sure that it was absolute evil or the hero who was fighting absolute evil. No matter who had launched the terrifying attack just now, the other person who could fight with the opponent for a day could be said to be a formidable expert. If these people had only taken the incident of the 54545 outer gate being submerged in black mud seriously before, they were now terrified. This was also why they had started to retreat without hesitation when they learned that White Wuxia had signaled for everyone to retreat. After all, this was something that could not be helped. A member of the community in the retreating team would occasionally look at the pitch-black devil's den behind them. If there was another heat ray like the one just now and it hit them, the consequences would be unimaginable. It was better to retreat for a while first. Then he looked at White Wuxia and Vera who were floating in the sky and sighed in relief. Now the ruler of the East Burrow, White Wuxia, and the most powerful demon in the North Burrow, Vera, were covering for their retreat. Even if there was another attack like the one just now, there was nothing to be afraid of. Reality proved that this person was overthinking. White Wuxia and Vera were indeed covering for their retreat, but the two of them still had lingering fears from the attack just now. That was absolute evil's move. Chapter 866. White Wuxia's expression was extremely serious. He was absolutely certain that it was absolute evil Azidakaha's move. The strongest gift of the flash element, Karina, was formed from the inheritance that destroyed 1/3 of the world. Villa will be fine. Although Vera comforted herself, she was still worried about Wuming. Since Vera was already like this, White Wuxia was naturally not any better. Even if she retrieved the spirit core, she might not be able to deal with absolute evil. If it's really the end, However, before White Wuxia could finish speaking, the entire devil's den instantly turned red as if it was burning from the inside. Sensing the danger, White Wuxia immediately retreated. Then a blazing pillar of fire shot up into the sky. The entire sky was dyed red, and space began to distort from the heat of the pillar of fire. This is the flames of the sun. White Wuxia raised a hand and covered half of his face. The eruption of the pillar of fire caused a violent gale. The gale seemed to be blowing away the air, sweeping away some of the surrounding teams that had yet to completely retreat. Everyone felt suffocated for more than 10 seconds. After withstanding the strong wind with great difficulty, what came next was the extreme heat. The realm wall began to slowly melt, and part of the land outside the realm wall directly turned into magma. Among the alliance members who had yet to completely retreat, many things, such as tents, paper, and human hair, were directly ignited by the heat of the pillar of fire. Even many people's clothes were burning. Even Shadora and the others with the fire dragon bloodline could not withstand the heat. The sweat that they had just excreted immediately evaporated, and their bodies also felt a severe lack of water. Some ordinary people did not even sweat and directly fainted. Some special races were also affected. For example, the body of Aisha Ignafartes, who came to volunteer as support, even fluctuated as if she was about to die. Jack was so scared that he immediately used his body to protect Aisha. It could be said that if White Wuxia had not asked the alliance members to start retreating, many people would have directly evaporated because of the pillar of fire that pierced through the entire black mud Denver. After all, the black mud cave covered the entire outer sect of the 54545. Although it was inconceivable, the fire pillars also covered the entire outer sect of the 54545. At such a close distance, White Wuxia could completely determine that the fire pillar in front of him had such an ability. Immediately following that, White Wuxia's expression changed because she realized that the pillar of fire had no intention of stopping. It was even accelerating the pillar of fire towards the sky. Not good. Seeing this scene, White Wuxia turned pale with fright. If a pillar of fire with such a range and power rushed into the sky, it would definitely smash a huge hole in the sky surrounding the box court. It might even affect a very large area of the box court curtain. This would definitely have a very serious impact on the box court. At that time, something would definitely happen to some of the races protected by the box curtain. For example, the vampires who couldn't face the sun directly would suddenly burn to death under the dangerous sunlight. However, someone was a step faster than White Wuxia. Swish! Vera rushed into the sky at an extremely fast speed like a hot knife through butter. It looked like Vera was prepared to block the powerful pillar of fire that rose from the ground by herself. Vera! White Wuxia cursed inwardly and immediately flew up. This pillar of fire was no trivial matter. Ignoring the range of effects, its power wasn't something that could be casually blocked. But so what? Didn't she need to block it if she couldn't block it? The answer was naturally no. White Wuxia was only complaining that Vera was prepared to take the risk alone. There was no other meaning. Therefore, White Wuxia immediately caught up to Vera. Vera, look at how quiet you are. Why are you always so impulsive? White Wuxia said to Vera as he flew at top speed. Because they will be in danger, Vera simply replied. Was it because she was a child of the community? White Wuxia glanced at the tiny people on the ground. Although direct sunlight was harmful to ghosts, it wasn't fatal. Vera didn't have to be so anxious, right? If Vera was really so responsible, the position of the North District's ruler would have been hers long ago. There must be other reasons. There's a Villo's aura in the pillar of fire. I have to help him resolve it before he makes a mistake. Vera meant that the Villo was the one who set the fire. As expected, it was for Wuming. White Wuxia immediately made a helpless expression. No matter what, this pillar of fire can't shatter the curtains of the box court. Otherwise it will be troublesome. White Wuxia corrected his expression. I don't have any defense-type gifts. It's too late to summon astral beasts. Vera, do you have any good ideas? To be honest, if you asked White Wuxia to destroy a city and commit murder and arson, she wouldn't have any problems. However, when it came to protection and defense, she really had shortcomings. Furthermore, she had yet to retrieve her spirit core, so she was even more of a dabbler. White Wuxia had also exposed this shortcoming during the Absolute Evil clone's surprise attack. Of course, this couldn't be blamed on White Wuxia. Everyone had their shortcomings. Furthermore, who asked White Wuxia to encounter such perverted crises time and time again? To deal with the doppelgangers of Absolute Evil, not to mention White Wuxia herself. Even her sworn enemy would have to put in some effort to annihilate all of them. Of course, if White Wuxia could retrieve the spirit core, she could also do it. If it was a normal attack, White Wuxia would naturally be able to defend against it. However, the pillar of fire this time was clearly not a normal attack. It looked like a fatal blow that Wuming had delivered to Az Dakaha. Regardless of whether Az Dakaha could block it, she, White Wuxia, had no way of blocking it for a while. Realm Gate. No. Vera's first thought was to use the Realm Gate to move the pillar of fire away. However, there was another Realm Gate on the other side of the Realm Gate. That might affect others. If it doesn't work, I can only release an equally powerful attack from the opposite direction to cancel it out. Although this method would cause a vertical explosion in the end, it might. No, looking at the range of the pillar of fire, the explosion would definitely affect some of the surrounding outer buildings. However, it was still much better than the curtain of the box being broken. In that case, I'll use the power of death to eliminate it. As a great devil born between life and death, Vera naturally controlled the power of death. Moreover, this would not cause an explosion. Vera's expression froze. She increased her flying speed and rushed directly to the top of the pillar of fire. Vera waved her hand. A large amount of black death energy filled Vera's surroundings and collided directly with the pillar of fire. It had to be said that this was effective. However, the range was too small. This pillar of fire affected 54,545 outer buildings. Vera could not completely block it. Leave the rest to me. White Wuxia also increased her speed. She was even faster than Vera just now. After all, White Wuxia was once the White Knight King. Vera had blocked many pillars of fire. She had to block the fish that escaped the net no matter what. At this moment, the pillar of fire suddenly decreased its speed. Furthermore, it was slowly disappearing. If one were to ask White Wuxia when she was the most aggrieved, she would definitely answer that there was no time more aggrieved than now. Chapter 867. When Wuming released the sun, he chanted 2 lines of incantations in a row, which made the sun incarnation double in strength. Not only that, when Wuming used storm, annihilation, flood, thunder god, phoenix, sun, and magician, the power of the 7 incarnations accumulated was all stuffed into the sun incarnation by Wuming. This not only increased the sun, to the point where it could cause fatal damage to Aziz Dakaha, but also increased the range of the sun incarnation to the extreme. Moreover, the black mud was simply the best fuel for the fire of the sun that was mixed with the power of the source. Therefore, it was precisely because of this, as well as the support of the power of the source, that the pillar of fire that broke out from the black mud cave could spread throughout the entire outer sect of the 54545, burning the black mud of the outer sect of the 54545 to nothing. However, Wuming was not a reckless person. After the explosion, the pillar of fire formed by the flames was released towards the sky. This was done by Wuming to prevent the explosion from spreading to the people or things nearby. It could be said that if Wuming allowed the sun to explode at will, then even if the people of the Alliance retreated to a certain distance, they would still be directly vaporized. After all, this was the fire of the sun that burned the entire outer sect of the 54545. And more importantly, the surrounding outer sect might also be affected by the flames. However, if the pillar of fire were to explode towards the sky, it would not spread to the people or things around. But if the pillar of fire were to be allowed to soar into the sky, the curtain of the box would definitely be shattered. Therefore, Wuming added the power of annihilation to the sun. When the sun erupted to a certain extent, annihilation would be activated and cut the pillar of fire in the middle. As everyone knew, the pillar of fire was not a pillar, but a pillar-like object formed by the continuous eruption of flames. If it was cut in the middle, the first half of the pillar of fire would dissipate, and the remaining power of the second half of the pillar of fire would not be enough to pierce through the curtain of the box. It would not even reach that height. Wuming used this to prevent the pillar of fire from piercing through the curtain of the box. Moreover, there was a long distance between the curtains of the box and the ground, which allowed the pillar of fire to erupt for some distance. Once the fire had weakened, annihilation, which had finished its countdown, would cut off the pillar of fire. After all, if he used annihilation to annihilate the pillar of fire from the beginning, it was likely that it would not succeed. After all, the power of sun, at this moment, was far greater than the power of annihilation. He could only wait for the pillar of fire to weaken before cutting it in the middle to achieve the desired effect. It turned out that Wuming was right. After the pillar of fire was cut in the middle, the first half quickly dissipated, and the remaining half of the pillar of fire began to slowly dissipate due to the lack of momentum. Although White Wuxia and Vera didn't know what had happened, they were certain that it was Wuming's doing. He didn't need anyone to clean up his mess for him. He could handle it alone. What a headache. I got a big fright. White Wuxia sighed helplessly, as if he was relieved of his burden. It could be said that Wuming had once again refreshed White Wuxia's worldview. In short, the crisis of the box's curtains shattering had been resolved. However, this crisis was really child's play compared to the crisis of absolute evil. I wonder how absolute evil is doing. With this in mind, White Wuxia looked down. She wanted to see how absolute evil was doing. Clouds floated around White Wuxia, and at the same time, there were many white clouds that blocked White Wuxia's line of sight. It was obvious how high her current position was. If she was outside the box, it would be a life-threatening height for ordinary humans, but it wasn't considered high in the world of the box. It wasn't considered high for White Wuxia either. With White Wuxia's powerful eyesight, she could still see the ground clearly. Although she couldn't see everything clearly, it was almost there. The entire outer gate of the 54545 division had completely sunk into a basin-like structure because this part of the land had completely evaporated. However, at this moment, the basin was not completely dry. Instead, it was filled with red magma. This magma was formed from the magma that had not directly evaporated. It filled the entire basin the size of the 54545 outer gate. Even the realm wall surrounding the outer door of 54,545 had stopped melting after half of it had melted because of the dissipation of the fire pillar. This extraordinary sun flame is actually able to easily melt the barrier of cultivation. If White Yiksha retrieved the spirit spark to recover her strength, she could also use the power of the sun to melt the realm wall. But she couldn't melt the realm wall so quickly. It was still the same sentence. As a separation area, the realm wall that carried the realm door wasn't easily destroyed. Only Az Dakaha, who had fused with the black soil, and Wuming, who had the power of origin, could destroy the realm wall so easily. White Yiksha didn't know much about absolute evil, but she had been in contact with Wuming for so long, but she never expected Wuming to have such strength. White Yiksha was now more and more interested in Wuming's identity. Villo, Vera, who had been silent all this time, suddenly said and flew straight down. Vera's figure blew away the clouds, allowing White Yiksha to see the full picture of the ground. White Yiksha focused her eyes. It seemed like there was someone in the magma. Although she couldn't see clearly in the magma, it should be Wuming if nothing unexpected happened. What about absolute evil? White Yiksha suddenly realized this problem. With a trace of worry, White Yiksha suddenly swooped down and followed Vera. The person in the magma was indeed Wuming, but he was motionless at this moment. Other than his shoulders and head floating above the magma, the rest of his body was soaked in the magma. Moreover, a large number of cracks had appeared all over Wuming's body. Specks of blue magic power particles were emitted from the cracks, and he allowed the magma to cause secondary damage to the spirit base. His current appearance was not caused by the explosion of the sun incarnation, but the collapse of the spirit base due to overload. Before, he forcibly used 7 incarnations at the same time, and several of them were directly at the maximum output. Although this spirit base was adjusted to the top of the servant spirit base by Wuming, it still couldn't withstand the use of 7 incarnations at the same time. If it's the original body, it should be no problem at all, Wuming said weakly. If it was the original body, let alone 7 incarnations at the same time, even 12 incarnations at the same time wouldn't be a problem. Wuming had a deep understanding of the strength of his body. Although he was trying to be brave by using his incarnation on this spirit base, he had now achieved his goal. Wuming under the magma couldn't help but clench his hand. Suddenly, a sweet voice came from the sky into Wuming's ears. Villo. Wuming subconsciously looked up. It turned out to be Vera. Are you okay, Villo? Flying above the magma, Vera looked at Wuming, who was soaked in the magma, and felt a little distressed. It's all my fault. I'm sorry. Vera apologized to Wuming with shame. If Wuming didn't help her deal with Maxwell, this wouldn't have happened. However, Wuming shook his head. Don't blame yourself, Vera. Nothing happened to me. Or rather, it was as Wuming wished. As for why, at this moment, White Yiksha also came above the magma and asked Wuming nervously, Villo, where is absolute evil now? As if responding to White Yiksha's words, there was a surge under the magma at this moment. Chapter 868. The reason why White Yiksha asked Wuming about Az Dakaha's whereabouts was because he knew that absolute evil could not be killed. Or rather, absolute evil could not be killed by Wuming, who was not human. The final trial of humans could only be passed by humans. Even if they really had the strength to crush absolute evil and kill it, absolute evil would revive again. That was the rule of the box court. White Yiksha did not know that Wuming could ignore the rules of the box court and kill absolute evil. That was why he was so anxious. After all, if absolute evil was still alive, then it must be like Wuming, staying in this magma lake. That was indeed the case. The entire magma lake began to fluctuate bit by bit, as if something was about to be released. Slowly, the entire magma lake began to shake violently. So it's still alive. Wu Ming, on the other hand, had an as expected expression. It seemed like he knew that Azedakaha had not been killed by him. After all, absolute evil can only be passed by humans. As a spirit, you naturally can't kill absolute evil. As White Yiksha spoke, he slowly landed beside Wuming and prepared to pull him up and take him away. Because it seemed like absolute evil would not immediately appear from the magma lake, they still had time to retreat. Vera also came to Wuming's other side, and prepared to cooperate with White Yiksha to rescue Wuming from the magma lake. Don't worry about me. This body is about to shatter. Leave first. Wuming shook his head and rejected their help. But my community also has a way to heal a spirit's body, Vera said pitifully. Vera did not want Wuming to leave just like that. If a hero who stopped absolute evil is sacrificed like this, it will be a huge blow to our morale, White Yiksha added. Moreover, the Alliance had already suffered a large number of casualties because of the fire pillars created by Wuming. If their morale dropped further, they would be completely finished. Wuming could not help but smile, then shook his head. I have no intention of sacrificing myself. Trust me. Although Wuming's tone was as weak as if he was about to pass away, his eyes were still full of vigor, and even a little happy. White Yiksha and Vera were rather puzzled. They looked at each other, attempting to find out what Wuming was talking about from each other. However, neither of them understood what Wuming meant. Do you guys believe me? If you do, then leave this place for now. Absolute evil will definitely fall into my hands today. Vera trusted Wuming unconditionally, but not White Yiksha. It wasn't that he didn't trust him, but that he didn't dare to take the risk. Wuming looked like he was seriously injured. If absolute evil killed Wuming, it would not only be a matter of morale, but there would also be no one here who could restrain absolute evil. Therefore, White Yiksha felt that it was best to retreat first. Otherwise, she could return the divine spark, retrieve the spirit core, and recover her former strength. In the worst-case scenario, White Yiksha could still use his final ability. Let me retrieve the spirit core. There's no need. Wuming instantly interrupted White Yiksha. Didn't I say that as long as I'm here, you just have to stay in the lower level? Although Wuming did not know if White Yiksha had any means to deal with Azedakaha, White Yiksha's expression just now was more like she wanted to perish together with Azedakaha. After all, White Yiksha was Wuming's friend. If it was someone else who wanted to perish together with absolute evil, Wuming might hesitate, but if it was a friend he knew who wanted to perish together with the enemy, Wuming would definitely be the first to object. Vera floated aside at a loss and did not speak. She just quietly watched the two of them talk. However, because the magma lake was shaking more and more violently, Vera also showed a hint of anxiety. White Yiksha, who also noticed this, was silent for a few seconds before finally sighing helplessly. Are you really okay with this? White Yiksha looked at Wuming's eyes very seriously. Wuming also responded with seriousness. Trust me. In the end, White Yiksha compromised and retreated with Vera. After White Yiksha and Vera retreated, Wuming looked at the magma lake that was becoming more and more agitated. Wuming had indeed expected Azedakaha to still be alive, but it was not because White Yiksha said that the final trial of humans had to be completed by humans. After all, Wuming himself was a bug and did not need to care about the rules of the box court. Wuming knew that Azedakaha was still alive mainly because of the information provided by Galji. Galji had said that to kill absolute evil, one had to solve the bestowal contest of the human's final trial. Furthermore, one had to break Azedakaha's shoulders, head, and heart at the same time before killing him. However, because of the black mud at the root, Wuming considered these weaknesses useless. Wuming's clone had obtained more information about Azedakaha from Galji in the nasalic space. Wuming had also asked Galji about the universe-like power that had instantly killed one of his clones. Wuming also told Galji that Galji had killed one of his clones. Galji was not surprised, perhaps because he had more or less guessed it. However, most importantly, Wuming already knew what the another cosmology was. According to Galji, Azedakaha's another cosmology was called Avesta. Of course, the name was not important. What was important was the ability of Avesta to imitate the opposite of Azedakaha's own cosmology of Zoroastrianism. and the cosmology of mankind that had to be crossed over. It could be used by Azidakaha in a limited manner, and could be used to counteract the gift of the enemy. To put it simply, Azidakaha's another cosmology allowed him to simulate the blessings of the enemy, and use the enemy's blessings to offset the enemy's blessings. It could be said that the more enemies Azidakaha had, the more he could imitate and the stronger he would become. Moreover, as long as it was not the Zoroastrian or human cosmology, Azidakaha would not be injured or even killed after activating Avesta. The gods of the Zoroastrian sect could not kill absolute evil, and humans lacked power. Other races such as gods and astrals could not pose a threat to Azidakaha after activating Avesta. Azidakaha didn't even put a 3-digit number of enemies in his eyes. As for 2-digit numbers, he could only look at them in his eyes. Therefore, Azidakaha was known as one of the strongest god-slayers. Wuming felt that it was not an exaggeration to call him one of the strongest in the box. This was also one of the important reasons why White Wuxia felt that Wuming could not kill absolute evil. You're tuning in to the Limei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.